With the arrival of the moving truck, Miharu began to cry upon seeing her best friend leaving. Miharu was Haruto Amakawa's childhood friend. They lived in neighboring apartments and grew up together until Haruto's parents divorced, forcing them to part ways. Even before being separated, they already felt very special towards each other. Before leaving, Haruto promised that he would see her again, and Miharu swore that the two of them would marry one day. The years passed, and Haruto worked hard to be accepted into a prestigious school in the city where they both lived. His father finally allowed him to return as long as he got a part-time job to support himself since he needed money to cover his expenses. Looking around, he saw a girl and recognized her immediately. And just as he was about to call out to her, a guy named Takahisa approached her since they had arranged to do something together. When he was about to put his arm around her, another girl named Satsuki appeared, complaining that he had gone there with her. So, the three of them left together, leaving Haruto behind, who simply smiled, accepting the situation. Soon, the trio arrived at the place where Aki and Masato were waiting for them. Satsuki commented on how much they had all grown, and Masato replied, saying that the girl had become even more beautiful, which made Aki nervous and Satsuki glow with happiness. They were gathered to celebrate another year of school. However, on that same day, the five of them were transported to an alternate world. During the process, Aishia noticed something strange and quickly alerted Haruto. The rest of the group was lost in that bizarre universe, with no idea where they had ended up. And to make matters worse, there was no phone signal. Suddenly, a huge man with a sword approached them. Meanwhile, Haruto was heading southeast, guided by Aishia. Along the way, he encountered a strange magical cloud and decided to investigate it. In the middle of the fog, he found a pink cell phone. In another part of that world, in a camp full of armed men, the recently arrived teenagers were thrown into a cell with several others. Except for Miharu, who was taken by a man wearing a top hat. She tried to communicate with him, but he spoke a different language. Aki shouted to her friend, but a soldier banged on the bars to silence her. Amidst all of this, Haruto saw smoke in the distance and headed toward it, and that was where the group from Earth had been taken. As soon as the guards noticed a stranger approaching, one of them whistled to alert the others. They quickly covered the cages with tarps to hide the imprisoned children just as Haruto arrived, searching for the person who had dropped the cell phone he found. The man with the top hat, who seemed to be the leader of those men, claimed he had never seen that phone in his life. Assessing the situation, Haruto realized that starting a fight there would not be advantageous for him, so he apologized and turned to leave. However, Aki screamed for help in Japanese, which caught Haruto's attention. The group's leader commented that their new merchandise was a bit noisy, but Haruto responded that the people who had just spoken were the ones he was looking for and asked what was happening there. The leader was surprised to see that this boy spoke the language of the prisoners and ordered his men to kill him. As the men drew their weapons and began to surround Haruto, he quickly realized that they were well organized and accustomed to fighting as a team. The leader commented that the boy confused bravery with recklessness, but Haruto showed no signs of fear despite being outnumbered. On the contrary, he charged at one of his opponents, who managed to defend himself and counterattack with light bullet magic. While fighting the other enemies, Haruto thought of his plan to capture the leader as a hostage to force a negotiation, but he knew that wouldn't be easy. Realizing there was no other option, he drew his swords and took down two enemies in front of him. Seeing the intruder approach, the mage fired a fireball, believing it would hit his target, but Haruto emerged from the smoke, throwing his swords at the rival. The man dodged the incoming weapons, but this left him vulnerable to Haruto's swift attack, who grabbed the enemy's dagger and plunged it into his chest. With that, the remaining bandits hesitated to advance, and their leader was paralyzed with fear. Haruto removed his glove and set it ablaze, ordering the prisoners to be released, and the bandit leader immediately complied. Without delay, Haruto surprised Aki and Masato by speaking to them in Japanese. He promised that he would explain everything later, but first he needed to know if anyone else had been captured along with them. Masato mentioned that they had a friend in another carriage, so Haruto went there and broke the lock using his special technique. And upon looking inside, he was shocked to see that the prisoner was none other than Miharu, his childhood friend. After that, he led the three back while telepathically asking Aishia to meet him before sunset, and Aishia replied that she would bring Celia with her. As they watched the sunset, Miharu paused for a moment to admire it and asked Haruto if they could talk. She then thanked him for saving her and asked for his name. Haruto stammered and replied that, at the moment, he was being called Haruto. Miharu and Aki were left speechless upon hearing that name, and Haruto realized that the little girl was named Aki, recalling that Haruto had a younger sister, even though they hadn't seen each other in a long time. To confirm, he asked if something was wrong, but Aki responded that there wasn't. Masato then asked why Haruto didn't have a last name and introduced himself as Masato, Aki's younger brother. Haruto reflected that Amakawa Haruto didn't have a younger brother, and Masato also didn't carry the Amakawa surname. Deducing that perhaps Haruto's mother had remarried and had a child with another man, he then asked Aki for her last name, and she said it was also just Aki. Haruto promised to explain why he didn't have a last name once they reached a more comfortable place. Without wasting time, he found a suitable location and used his undoing ability to lift a large stone from the ground that contained his house within it. At that moment, Ishia arrived with Celia, speaking in Estalian, which was the language of that world. Celia was delighted to see her friend again, and Haruto introduced the people from Earth, explaining that Celia had once been his teacher. After the introductions, Aisha kissed her friend on the forehead, triggering a magical reaction. Then, she repeated the gesture with Miharu, creating a temporary connection that allowed them to understand each other's language. Haruto was surprised to discover that Aisha could do that, and she explained that it was only possible because he understood both languages. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to do it. With that said, Aisha admitted that she was hungry, and Haruto invited everyone inside the stone house. Once inside, he offered them a bath if they wanted one, while Masato celebrated the opportunity to take a bath. His sister Aki told him to stop being so excited, making everyone laugh. And when the girls gathered for the bath, Miharu discovered that Haruto's real name was Ryo, and that Aisha was a spirit who had made a pact with him. Celia was the one who shared this with Miharu. But since she had just met Aisha herself, she didn't know much about the details. Aki approached to understand a bit more of the conversation, and Miharu explained that Aisha was not human but rather a nature spirit. After the bath, it was time for everyone to eat, and Masato asked if they were in a fantasy RPG world. Haruto responded that he hadn't played many such games in his past life, so he wasn't sure. But it seemed to be something like that. Although it was a bit different from a game because there was no reset button there. Given the situation, Masato asked if things would have gone badly for them if Haruto hadn't shown up, and Haruto replied that they would probably have ended up as slaves. Celia then arrived, thanking Haruto for offering such a wonderful bath, and when Haruto noticed that she was wearing completely different clothes, she explained that Aki had lent them to her, saying it would be strange to wear a wedding dress again after a bath. Speaking of which, since the newly arrived group didn't have other clothes, Ryo decided that he would buy more essential items the next day. And Miharu reminded him that they had no money, but Ryo offered to cover any necessary expenses there. Celia asked where they would shop, and Ryo suggested Mandy as a good place. Celia was pleased with the idea and wondered if it would be possible to sell her wedding dress to get more money, but once again, Ryo said they didn't need to worry. And with that, he invited everyone to eat. Seeing the table full of food, Celia asked if Ryo had prepared everything, and he confirmed. During the meal, Ryo learned that the group had been brought to that world by a phenomenon caused by summoning magic. Miharu asked if there was any way to return to Earth, but Haruto admitted he had no answer for that because this situation was very different from his own reincarnation in that world. Aki commented that Haruto had died in a traffic accident when he was a university student, and asked if his memories returned to him when he was a child in this world. Ryo confirmed this and explained that because of that, he believed his experience wasn't of much significance to the newcomers. Celia reflected on everything and concluded that the 6 pillars of light they saw, along with the events of this year, the year 1000 of the Sacred Era, might be linked to the legend of the 6 wise gods. Ryo said that 1,000 years after the Divine or Demon War, 6 sacred stones would shine in different colors, and pillars of light would rise to the sky. Then, heroes clad in divine garments would return from beyond the world and, in place of the 6 wise gods, lead humanity. Even so, Ryo didn't believe they were the heroes mentioned in the legend, and Celia agreed. Miharu then recalled that they were with other people when they came to this world, specifically Satsuki and Takirisa, so perhaps they were somewhere around as well. And Ryo, although uncertain, considered this possibility. Miharu was worried because she and her friends were saved by Ryo, but the others might not have had the same luck, especially in such a completely unknown and hostile place. As the conversation was coming to an end, Ishia yawned at the table, stood up, and pulled Ryo toward the bedroom, saying she was sleepy and called him to rest after a long day. Ryo asked for a minute, but Aisha insisted as she had already used up a lot of energy that day. Just after saying that, she collapsed onto Ryo's chest, still managing to stay on her feet. Celia was completely flustered, thinking that escalated quickly. But the spirit explained that she was just recharging and that she always slept with Haruto. Seeing her teacher bewildered by this information, Ryo explained that there was a good reason for it. And visibly shaken, Celia shouted that he hadn't even taken a bath yet, while Miharu timidly raised her hand, offering to clean the table. Likewise, the siblings joined her to avoid watching the uncomfortable scene any longer. After that, Ryo explained to them what was actually happening, detailing the specifics. To avoid further discomfort, Ishia mentioned that she would sleep with Miharu because, even though she had less magical energy than Ryo, she also had some. It was then decided that Aishia and Miharu would sleep in one of the rooms, the siblings in another, Celia in one more, and Ryo in his own. Everyone then headed to their rooms to rest, with Ryo accompanying Celia to her room before returning to his own. He thought that he would have never imagined encountering Miharu again in this world, and wondered what she would do if she discovered that he held Haruto's old memories. However, he soon concluded that he was no longer Haruto, and that now he was Ryo. A long time ago, he had decided to dirty his hands in search of revenge against that man, and Yamakawa Haruto was already dead. At that moment, Celia knocked on her student's door, wanting to talk. Ryo invited her in and served tea to his teacher, something that hadn't happened in a long time. Taking advantage of the opportunity of being alone, Celia went straight to the point, asking where he had found Aisha and what this story about a past life was. And after saying all that, she realized she might have gone too far and apologized. Ryo, in turn, answered her questions one by one. First, he explained that he had memories of a past life and that this person came from the same world as Miharu and the others. That was why he understood Japanese. At this point, he recalled the moment when his teacher first found him in the alleys. Ryo regained the memories of his past life shortly before that, and the name of that person was Haruto. It was then that Celia realized he chose Haruto as a pseudonym because of that. In those memories, Ryo was 20 years old, and he was older than Celia. She commented that the boy always seemed strange and mature for his age, and thanked him for kidnapping her since that allowed them to be together. Although she was still worried about her father, at least she was relieved to be with Ryo. She wanted to let her father know that she was safe. So Ryo suggested that she write a letter. When she got excited about the idea, he assured her that they would go to a stationery store to buy pens and paper, and whatever else she needed for that. Meanwhile, in Beltran, the capital of the Beltran kingdom, Charles was informed by Rice that the recent events were disastrous and that no one could have predicted that his wife would be kidnapped. In response, Charles said that the culprit had been punished. And according to the reports, after Alfred's attack, there were no traces of him. However, Charles still had no idea where Celia was. Currently, the capital's borders were closed to allow for a thorough search of the entire region. Hearing this, Rice analyzed that the boy and the spirit had probably hidden Celia, which was a bold move on their part. Charles added that a hero had descended upon the kingdom, and his own father had taken him under his custody. Rice hoped that the hero would become a loyal ally to the kingdom of Beltran, but confessed that he had wished the kingdom had secured another sacred stone. Charles replied that the stone was with Princess Flora and Duke Ruganoth, and that by now, they were likely receiving the hero. It was a complicated situation because they could be considered traitors for aligning themselves with the kingdom of Galark. Speaking of that kingdom, Rice mentioned that among the guests were Lizalot and Cretia from the Rich Merchants Guild, a very talented woman. According to Charles, he thought there was no need to worry because she was only 15 years old and all, but Rice mentally disagreed, thinking that Lizalot and the Rich Guild were as much of a threat as Duke Ruganoth's faction. And if no action was taken soon, something bad could happen. The scene then shifts to Rodania, the capital of Rodan, where a girl named Rowana was serving food to a young man. He asked her to sit for a while because he didn't like seeing her standing, and Rowana politely accepted the invitation. Another nobleman then confessed that he had never thought he would have the honor of inviting a legendary hero to his home, and that if the young man wanted anything, he just had to ask. The boy found it amusing to be called a legendary hero, since these people seemed to believe that the novels published online reflected reality. A few days earlier, this young man was resting peacefully in his bed at home when he was suddenly thrown into a new fantasy world. Thrown into a field covered in grass, he stood up and noticed dozens of soldiers around him, which made him panic as he tried to understand where he was. Flora Beltram introduced herself as the second princess of Beltram, while the other man identified himself as Duke Gustavo Huguenot, the princess's guardian. And the boy, who ended up in that world by accident, realized that the arrival of these nobles seemed like something out of a hero summoning story. When Flora mistook him for a hero, he was certain of it. According to the prophecy left by the 6 wise gods, 1,000 years after the founding of the sacred era, heroes would appear wherever the sacred stones were. Flora believed that the katana in his hand was a clear sign that he was a hero. And without realizing it, the young man noticed he was holding a beautiful sword, which triggered his inner nerd. Soon he felt full of confidence and asserted that he understood the situation. Deep down, however, he thought the whole story was a bit flimsy, especially because the people in that world seemed to understand Japanese. At that moment, Flora asked for the name of her summoned hero, and he answered that his name was Sakata Hiroaki. Back to the present moment. He was sitting at a table full of food but had no idea of the true purpose of that meeting. Whatever the reason, he planned to act calmly and pretend to be in control of the situation. To be honest, He admitted he was a bit confused about the whole hero thing, so he asked if the sacred stone belonged to the princess who had brought him there. Flora thought so, and Sakata assumed that if he was brought there, he could probably go back. The princess also found it strange since the hero was not supposed to even mention that. Sakata began to believe he had been kidnapped since he had his own life in the original world and was brought to this place against his will. The princess apologized, saying that recent events had left her lost as well. Sakata replied that he wasn't blaming anyone, but clearly, he was the one at the greatest disadvantage there. Duke Stewart's son then commented that the hero was being disrespectful to the princess, so his father reprimanded him for interfering. After that, the Duke apologized for his son's aggressiveness and promised to explain everything about the situation the young man was in. In turn, Sakata was genuinely interested in the matter. Meanwhile, Ryo left his hidden cave to go shopping with Celia and Miharu. Miharu asked the two siblings to take care of everything properly while they were away, and Ryo explained that there was a barrier around the house, but that they still shouldn't try to leave. Suddenly, Aisha appeared and picked up Celia in her arms, flying through the sky. The siblings watched in awe, while Ryo asked if he could carry Miharu the same way, and as soon as she agreed, the four of them were soaring through the sky, and Miharu was enchanted by it. Celia asked Aisha how much she knew about Ryo, and she replied that she knew almost everything since Haruto's memories flowed to her through the pact they had. In other words, Aisha and Ryo shared these memories with their deeply connected consciousnesses, which was the nature of a spirit pact due to their closeness. With that, Celia admitted feeling a bit uncomfortable with the fact that Aisha knew a side of Ryo that she herself did not, but the spirit reassured her, explaining that Haruto had changed and was gradually learning to trust people. She added that if Haruto now knew good people, it was thanks to Celia, because when he was completely alone, she was the one who reached out to him. When they arrived at their destination, Ryo explained to Miharu why she needed to call Celia Cecilia. This was precisely to avoid her being recognized and all that. It was also the moment for everyone to change their hair color before entering the city, to avoid problems. Once done, they entered Amand, the merchant city of the Galaric Kingdom. At one point, Miharu asked why there was such a long line on the street, and Ryo explained that it was because of a mandio shop, a local specialty. The Rich Guild offered a variety of foods and sweets that resembled those from Earth. Soon, the group arrived at the Rich Guild, where they were greeted by Chloe, who was in charge of attending to visitors that day. Ryo asked Chloe to take care of his friends while he went out for about an hour, and Celia took the opportunity to try on some clothes upstairs. While Ryo was handling some matters, the girls were spending time at the guild, and Celia encouraged Miharu to try on some clothes as well, despite her extreme shyness. Though embarrassed, Miharu agreed and ended up trying on some outfits along with the others. Meanwhile, Ryo found no useful leads and realized that things were moving quickly with limited options. Chloe asked if Celia needed anything else, and she replied that she would like to see some stationery items. Ryo then returned and asked Miharu if she had found something she would like to buy, only to notice that she was holding a bra. He quickly turned away and apologized. In any case, he advised Miharu not to worry about him and to enjoy her shopping. After saying that, Ryo was preparing to leave, but Miharu asked him to try on an outfit she had picked for him. When he put it on, she realized how well it suited him, and all the other girls agreed. Seeing this, Ryo decided to keep the outfit since he was running out of options in his wardrobe. Chloe mentioned a promotion on men's clothing. If he bought another item, he would get a discount. Ryo praised the Rich Guild's sales skills, and Celia asked if she could choose the next outfit for him. Later, back at the inn, Liselot was informed that it would take some time before the borders would reopen. Liselot believed that Beltram wanted to control the flow of information about the matter. Because of this, she couldn't conduct her business, which essentially left her stuck there. Arya suggested that her mistress take the time to relax and have some fun, and the young woman liked the idea. After all, Duke Arbor's reputation had been ruined, which was quite amusing for the Galaric Kingdom and worthy of celebration. By the way, Arya expressed her sympathy for the Duke's fiancée, Celia, who was an old friend of hers. Arya suspected that someone hostile to the Arbor family was behind what had happened, while the blue-haired girl pointed out that amidst the chaos, heroes had appeared, and one was probably summoned to the Galaric Kingdom, which would be grand. Liselot concluded, saying that she needed to hurry to return as soon as possible. And back at Ryo's house, the girls brought an endless array of clothes that Celia and Miharu had chosen. They genuinely hoped that Ryo would like all of them. The siblings also tried on some, and in the midst of it all, Ryo lamented that he couldn't find specific information about Satsuki and Takahisa. However, it seemed true that the heroes had arrived as the legend of the 6 wise gods predicted. Ryo believed that the 3 Japanese people in his house were brought here for that reason, along with Takahisa and Satsuki, who might have come as heroes. According to the prophecy, there were 6 heroes, and perhaps those 2 were among them. Upon realizing that his older brother might be in this world, Akimazato expressed the intention to search for him. Ryo understood their concern but emphasized that they needed to learn the language and customs of this world before venturing out. Speaking of departing, Ryo mentioned that he knew some trustworthy people, namely the spirits, and believed they could offer valuable advice. Aishia, tired of everything, just wanted to eat, and Ryo agreed that it was time to prepare a meal. Miharu offered to help, and Ryo took the opportunity to announce that they would have Japanese food that night. Watching the two cook, Masato recalled how Miharu always felt uncomfortable around men but didn't seem to mind Haruto. Finally, Celia joined in, eager to learn how to cook, and it didn't take long for the kitchen team to prepare a delicious meal. Then, we see Ryo heading to the demi-human village, and everyone advises him to be careful on his way. Masato states that he will be fluent in Australian by the time Ryo returns, and Ryo asks Aisha to take care of everyone for him. She agrees, and Ryo takes a stone from his storage, using it to teleport to the demi-human village. Upon arriving at the spirit village, he finds Latifa, who is happy to see him again and hugs him. She welcomes him, and he asks if she's alright. She confirms she is, and Sarah, Alma, and Ophelia also come to greet him. They explain that they sensed a distortion in spatial energy, so they guessed he might have returned. Ryo then says that this time he came to consult with the elders about something, and Sarah mentions that she will inform the elders right away. The scene shifts to Ryo explaining the situation to the elders, and they realize that the anomalous torrent of mana that came rushing there originated from the Stral region. Ryo mentions that this may have been the result of those 6 pillars of light, and he believes these pillars were some kind of space-time magic. He speculates that the pillars were used to summon people from another world to this place, and informs them about the rumors surrounding the 6 heroes in the Stral region. Ursula asks Ryo why he thinks the heroes were summoned from another world, and he explains that it's because he took in a boy and 2 girls who used to live in that other world. The elders wonder if the 3 are heroes, but Ryo says no, explaining that he found them in a place that wasn't connected to the pillars of light. However, they were with 2 other people before being transported, and he believes that those 2 may be the heroes while these 3 were caught up in the summoning and taken by mistake. One of the elders then asks if he was able to communicate with those from the other world, and he responds that he did because he knows their language. This raises several questions in the elders' minds, and Ryo explains that in his past life, he also lived in that other world. The elders have difficulty understanding this, and he mentions that he will explain it on another occasion. He then hopes that the explanation provided so far is enough for them to understand the situation, and the elders agree to set the matter aside for now. He says he also has a request to make. They obviously state that they will do whatever is possible to help, since it's a request from him. And Ryo asks if it would be possible to let the 3 he mentioned, along with 1 other person, stay in the village for now. They ask him to elaborate a bit more, and he explains that he's looking for clues on how to return these 3 to their world. But it will be difficult to act while these people are under his care. He knows that the villagers are much more skilled than he is when it comes to space-time magic, and they understand what he's trying to convey and agree to take them in. One of the elders asks who the 4th person is, and he mentions that it is a teacher to whom he owes a lot and who was being forced into marriage. So he rescued her on the day of the wedding. The elders laugh upon hearing this, thinking he is quite the charmer, and agree to take care of everyone, but with the condition that the 4 will keep the village's information a secret when they return to the Stral region. Ryo agrees to explain this to them and mentions that he will depart tomorrow to bring them back. The scene then shifts to him talking with Latifa in private, and he asks if she managed to understand today's discussion. She says she did, and he apologizes for talking about his past life without her permission. He mentions that he wouldn't have been able to explain things to the elders without revealing that, and she asks if she should also tell them about her origins. Ryo says she doesn't need to force herself to do anything, and she asks if the people he mentioned earlier are Japanese, to which he responds yes, and she asks if he told them about his Japanese origins. He says he did, and that if he hadn't, there would have been no way to explain how he understands their language. She states that it should have been a secret between the 2 of them, and he thinks she is being cute at that moment. He then tells her that even if other Japanese appear in this world, it won't change the fact that she is special to him. He reminds her that he told her he was in love with his childhood friend in his last life, and that he also had a younger sister. She remembers clearly, and he says that one of the people he rescued is that childhood friend, and the other is the sister he spoke of. He mentions that he did not tell them he has the memories of Haruto Amakawa, and she wonders why. Our protagonist explains that they are already confused by being in a world different from what they're used to, and he didn't want to overwhelm them further. He hopes that Latifa also won't reveal this to them, and Latifa asks if he actually wants to tell them about it. But he says he wants to keep it a secret between the 2 of them, saying he may have to tell someone one day, but not now, and hugs her. The scene then cuts to Haruto leaving the village the next day, and the elders wonder when he will return with the others. He says it will be in 2 weeks, and Latifa asks him to take care of himself, and with him promising to be fine, he sets off on his way. In another scene change, we now see Liselot reporting to King Francois Galarc about the events that took place in the royal capital of Beltrum, and he says he has another request for her. He asks her to summon Duke Huguenot, and she wonders what he will be doing there. He explains that the sacred stone in his kingdom has summoned a heroine, which is why they are planning to invite ambassadors from neighboring kingdoms to host a reception to introduce the hero. He mentions that he would also like to invite the hero from the kingdom of Beltrum for this occasion, and hopes that she will deliver the letter on his behalf. She agrees. And he mentions that he has heard that the hero of Beltrum is named Sakata Hiroaki. Liselotte is surprised to hear this and thinks that the name feels nostalgic. She realizes that this person might be from Japan but says nothing to the king about it. She then asks for the name of the hero summoned in their kingdom and learns that it is Sumeragi Satsuki. The king speculates that the heroes might be from the same land since their names are similar, and he asks Liselotte to meet his heroine, instructing his daughter to guide Liselotte to Satsuki. Liselotte then meets the heroine, who introduces herself. The scene then cuts to Rice observing Amande from a distance during the night. He thinks he can understand why the Rika Merchant Guild has its headquarters in this city. We see that he is surrounded by some zombie-like monsters, and he thinks he has found excellent raw material there. With that, he orders the monsters to find anyone with large amounts of mana in the vicinity of Amande and bring them to him alive, ordering them to kill as many unnecessary witnesses as possible and giving them a deadline until the following night. He believes that with this move, he will have all the puppets he needs, deciding to use this last opportunity to make money. After that, he plans to stay under the radar for a while. In yet another scene change, we now see Celia teaching Masato the Australian language. He is having some difficulty but starts to grasp it. Celia tells him that he has improved a lot since they started 2 weeks ago. And in the kitchen, Miharu asks Aki if Haruto will return soon. Aki says that Haruto is all Miharu has been talking about since the previous night and wonders how long they will continue living like this. She says she should have started a new school term by now, but instead, she was sucked into this world and has no idea where Takahisa and Satsuki are. She thinks she may never see her mother or anyone else she knew again. And Miharu tries to comfort her. Aki asks Miharu if she isn't worried, and Miharu says she is. But she has Aki, Masato, and also Haruto and the others, mentioning that it makes her feel calmer. Aki wonders if Miharu doesn't want to return to their old world, and Miharu confirms she does. But panicking won't help. Haruto is already doing his best, and all they can do now is trust him. Aki then asks what Miharu thinks of Haruto, and Miharu mentions that in her old world, she used to feel anxious around men, but whenever she's with him, it feels like she's having fun. Miharu says that he is reliable and a good person, and perhaps it also has something to do with the fact that he shares the same name as Aki's brother, Haruto. Aki becomes annoyed upon hearing this and mentions that comparing Haruto with her brother is simply rude. Miharu apologizes, and Aki does the same after realizing her mistake, then steps outside to calm down. Outside, she thinks she's an idiot for blaming Miharu when she did nothing wrong and wonders if Miharu is still in love with Haruto Amakawa. While she is completely lost in thought, Miharu appears there. They then notice the monsters from earlier in front of them, and the two wonder what those creatures are. They think they need to get back inside the house, but the monsters break through the barrier, attempting to attack them, yet Aisha saves the two. She then fires at them, and Masato hears the noise from inside the house. He wonders what that was, and Celia tells him to stay put while she goes to check. The girls ask Aisha what those were, and she says they were monsters likely attracted by the barrier's magical energy. She realizes that the monster is still alive even after taking her attack and remembers her promise to Rio to protect everyone. Two of the monsters try to attack together, and Aisha manages to stop one of them, but the others break through, and Celia takes care of them. The monster tries to attack again, but Haruto jumps in from above to save them and apologizes for being late. He then realizes that the monster that just attacked is strong and asks Aisha if she knows anything about them. She says she only knows that they seem to be monsters and that the darker one is stronger than the other two. Rio then decides to draw the darker one and leaves the gray ones to Aisha. She understands, and he prevents the darker monster from escaping. The monster attacks him, but he dodges and manages to immobilize it. He tries to see if the monster can understand him, but he finds that it doesn't and stabs it with his sword. The monster then says something to him and dies, leaving behind a crystal. Upon seeing the crystal, Rio thinks that it must have been a monster and notices that Aisha has also defeated the other monsters. Rio then thanks his teacher for the help, but mentally he only remembers that the monster asked to be killed by him. After that, Aki apologizes for leaving the house even after Rio asked her not to, And Miharu also apologizes, saying that Aki only went outside because she said something insensitive. Ryo changes the subject, saying that he smells something good and wonders if they're making amuris. Miharu confirms, and Celia mentions that they should eat since she's hungry, and Masato agrees. Ryo says he's also starving, and Miharu and Aki go to serve the food, but before they leave, Ryo informs everyone that they will be moving houses soon. After that, we see the surviving monsters returning to Rice with some humans, and he notices that one group is missing. He wonders if they were killed by his targets and states that it's not easy to kill a group of revenants. He thinks his plans will be delayed since their numbers have been reduced. But for now, he decides to just make more puppets, wondering how many will return to him this time.
Meanwhile, in the spirit village, Latifa reflects on Ryo, mentioning to herself that soon the person he loved in his past life, as well as his younger sister from that life and the teacher he holds in such high regard, will come to this village. Ryo mentioned that she doesn't need to tell these people about herself or about her past life, but knowing they are important to him, Latifa considers being honest with them. At this point, Ryo's group arrives at the spirit village, and everyone is amazed at the speed of teleportation and the beauty of the place where they've arrived. Latifa and the other girls are there to welcome the newcomers, and the humans are struck by the appearance of the beast people. The local inhabitants approach Aisha after not seeing her for a long time, and seeing this, Miharu asks if Aisha is important to these people. Ryo explains that here, spirits of the highest class, who can materialize and take human form, are considered divine. Upon hearing these, Miharu apologizes for treating the spirits so informally, but Aisha herself asks not to be addressed formally. Meanwhile, Celia introduces herself to Latifa after learning that she is Ryo's younger sister, and apologizing for her boldness, expresses her desire to touch the Beast Girl's tail, directly making her request. With the Beast Girl's consent, the teacher wastes no time in fulfilling her wish. Aki then comments that Celia seems to like fluffy things, so Latifa smiles and responds that this place might be paradise for her. Hearing this, the newcomers are surprised that this resident spoke Japanese. So Latifa explains that, like Ryo, she also has memories of her past life, and she offers to teach Stralian to the visitors. Ryo asks if the young beast girl is sure about this, and she replies that she had already decided and that her friends and the elders are aware of her decision. She made this decision knowing how insecure it feels to come from another world, and this would be a way to make the newcomers feel more comfortable in a place they've never been before. Recalling her challenging childhood in Stral, where she initially struggled to adapt, Latifa emphasizes that she is Ryo's younger sister and will always help when she can. Thus, Ryo thanks his sister for her effort and admits that it makes him happy, which also brings joy to the Beast Girl. Soon the other villagers approach the humans and announce that they will help everyone adjust to life in the village. The white-haired one introduces herself as Sarah, the green-haired one as Orphea, and the red-haired as Alma, and everyone is very pleased to meet the visitors. Similarly, Aki introduces herself and her brother, and Miharu introduces herself last. Upon hearing her name, Latifa realizes that this is the girl Ryo was in love with. Afterward, everyone is led to the village where people are waiting to welcome the humans. However, Aki notices that the locals seem to be wary of them, so Ryo explains that the people of this village generally keep their distance from humans, although there is quite a bit of curiosity about their race. A young beast girl approaches and touches Miharu, who greets her. The little girl then whispers something in Latifa's ear, who explains that she found the human's uniform quite different. Miharu worries about looking strange since she dressed more formally to be received by the elders, but Latifa says that the little girl loved her outfit. Reassured, the human comments that the child's ears are very cute, making her smile and run back to her mother. Soon, the beast people approach the newcomers to establish initial contact, and they indeed form an instant connection, showing warmth and hospitality. Amidst all this, Miharu notices that Latifa was looking at her face somewhat intently, making the beast girl blush upon realizing she might have crossed a boundary. Still embarrassed, she asks if she can call the human Miharu, and after receiving confirmation, Aki and Masato quickly join in to socialize better. The newly arrived humans are then taken to a grand feast prepared by the villagers. Masato can't hide his excitement over the amount of food, though his sister urges him to show a bit more respect. However, Latifa makes it clear that there's no need to worry about formalities at this welcome party, and shortly afterward the elders arrive to meet the visitors. Sildra mentions that Aisha's presence brings great joy to the spirit people, while Dominic gets too close to the children to observe them, and Ursula asks her companion not to scare the children with that grumpy face, prompting everyone present to burst into laughter. At that moment, Dryas expresses joy over the arrival of Ryo and Aisha, and all the villagers are delighted by the presence of the entity. Until nightfall, the villagers and visitors continue eating, drinking, and celebrating this wonderful gathering. To Masato's surprise, the villagers prepared a dish called inarizushi, so he calls his sister to eat. Aki can't believe they prepared this traditional Japanese dish, but Latifa explains that she personally cooked that portion to make the Japanese guests feel more at home. Thus, they gather at the table to relive the taste of this food while Latifa watches Ryo being well treated by everyone. In response, Aki remarks that everyone really likes Haruto and that he is a great older brother, to which Latifa responds that she is proud to call him her brother. Upon hearing this, Aki lowers her head and confesses that she feels envious, internally reflecting that she also wants to see her brother soon and wonders where he might be at that moment. After pondering this, she assures Latifa that she will study the language of this world diligently. After the party, the humans are taken to their new residence while they stay in the village, and everyone is amazed at the size of the house. The beast women explain that they can use the outdoor bath and then rest well, and Masato gets excited about the bath. However, he ends up missing out after losing in rock, paper, scissors, while all the girls enter the water. Because of this, Masato regrets not asking Haruto to play in his place, as surely a guy would have won. Ryo is not so sure about this, so the boy wants to test what he's saying by challenging him to a round. However, he chose rock while Ryo chose scissors. In the bath, Miharu looks up at the stars visible in the sky while Aki acknowledges that they've truly arrived at an incredible place, but fears they may never return home. At that moment, Miharu responds that they will return one day, but Aki's words instantly dampen the mood. Masato wants to know why Haruto is so strong in any situation, but the older one explains that it's not exactly like that. He has a brief flashback and states that there is something he needs to do, but to succeed in that endeavor, he needs to become stronger. Hearing this, Masato confesses that he also needs to get stronger to protect Miharu and Aki. At that moment, Latifa arrives and announces that the bath is ready, so Ryo invites the boy to join him. Celia finds a letter on the table upon returning from the water. The next morning, she finds Ryo training with his sword in the forest and takes the opportunity to apologize for making him wait so long, but at least her friends are quickly getting used to the village. Therefore, he announces that he will deliver the letter to Celia's parents. Moved, the teacher asks if the young man isn't overburdened since he is working so hard to send Miharu and the others back to their original world. Additionally, he intended to erect a gravestone for his parents, but having to save Celia seems to have delayed all his plans. And for that reason, she tells Ryo he doesn't need to do anything more for her. Regarding this, the young man admits that he has things to do, but affirms that the teacher is not hindering him in any way, because at that moment, all he wanted was to save her, just as he deeply wishes to send the three back home. Then after delivering Celia's letter, he plans to go to Rodania to gather information about the heroes. With this, Celia thanks him and asks to be notified if her friend ever needs anything, since after all, she still has more mana than any other mage in the kingdom of Beltrum, and no matter what happens, she will always stand by Ryo's side. After this conversation, she stores her letter and prepares for the journey alongside Ryo and Aisha. The Beast Girls then gather to say goodbye to their friends and assure them that they will take care of the humans who stayed behind. Miharu then appears, as she has a gift for the travelers, a basket full of food for them to eat during their journey. Ryo comments that it must have taken a lot of effort to prepare all that food, but she insists it's the least she can do considering everything the young man did to help them, and that one day she will repay that debt of gratitude. In response, Ryo states that the food is more than enough. Sarah and Alma tease Miharu, highlighting that she put in a lot of effort to prepare all that food as if she were a good wife, while Masato assures that he will work hard while Ryo is away. With that, the trio sets off on their journey, while Latifa expresses her desire to make the humans fluent in Strelian to surprise Ryo, Aisha, and Celia. Meanwhile, in Rodania, Liselotte asks Hiroaki to attend the party in the kingdom of Galark. While listening to her, Hiroaki notes that everything about this girl is extremely beautiful, whether it's her appearance or even her voice. Moreover, he knows that Flora and Rona are already at a high level, but this situation with a young noble woman from a neighboring kingdom caught the hero by surprise because, after everything that happened, he feels like the main character has finally appeared. With that, he crosses his arms and states that he will attend the party, but wants to know if Liselotte will be present. When she confirms that's the plan, He reaffirms his attendance, and she expresses her excitement at seeing the hero of Beltrum there, leaving Hiroaki completely smitten. As night falls, Aisha and the others arrive in Clare, the capital of Count Clare's lands where Celia was born and raised. According to her, there is a secret passage in the garden that connects to the main house, and since only her family knows about it, Celia plans to leave the letter there and return. Deciding this, they venture through the mansion's garden, trying not to be seen by the guards. To avoid being detected, Rio announces that they should use spirit arts to hide from that point on, a task Aisha takes on. Having done so, they reach the fountain at the center of the garden, where Celia opens the entrance to the secret passage before the guards arrive. Soon, they reach the underground corridor and Celia takes a lantern that emits a green glow. At the same time, a sphere glows the same color in the study of Roland Clare, Celia's father and the Count of the region. At that moment, he opens the passage from inside his study, surprised that someone entered from the outside. There, the girl leaves the letter on a desk while her father shouts her name, wondering if it could be her. Almost crying, she tries to move forward, despite the overwhelming emotion she's feeling at that moment. In the letter, she apologizes to her parents for causing so much worry, but asks them to rest assured because she is currently living a peaceful life alongside people she trusts. She knows she disappointed her parents by abandoning her marriage to the Duke Arbor's family, but made it clear that she is well and that one day she will return to Clea to explain everything. Until then, she wishes her parents to take care of their health, ending the letter by thanking them for their unconditional love. After reading the letter, as Rio and the others are about to leave the mansion, Roland runs outside shouting for Celia. With no hope of finding her at that moment, he reflects that the girl has not disappointed him and promises that one day he will see his beloved daughter again. A little distance away, Rio asks if Celia truly doesn't want to see her father, and she explains that it's better this way for now. In any case, the young man assures her that one day they will return, and everything will be all right. So the girl wipes her tears, believing that will indeed happen. The scene then shifts, and we see Liselotte traveling with Arya when, during their flight, they experience severe turbulence as a dragon appears nearby, likely forcing them to make an emergency landing in the nearest city. The following morning, a dragon soared through the skies of Nor, the territory of Duke Cretia. Nearby aboard a vessel, the captain realized that flying to Amande could be dangerous, so he decided to make an emergency landing. Liselotte praised him for his wise decision, and he felt honored by her words. Meanwhile, Arya drew Liselotte's attention to what appeared to be the enchanted airship of the Huguenot Duke's family. The scene progresses, and we then see that Liselotte's crew is greeted by Baronet Boxa, and also by the hero Sakata Hiroaki, who asked if Liselotte had found the hero of Beltrum. She confirmed that she had, and informed him that she had also delivered an invitation to the hero. After this brief explanation, she questioned why the whole group was waiting for her there, and Hiroaki explained that the Huguenot family had business in Galark and that they would make a stop in Amande. Therefore, he had accompanied them, but during the journey they encountered a dragon in the skies. Friends, I ask you, what do you think of Hiroaki so far? I don't know, I confess I find him very repulsive, and nothing has made me warm up to him yet. Huguenot mentioned that a meeting was necessary to share information and discuss the next steps, asking Baronet Boxa to provide a location. He then suggested his own mansion, although he believed it wasn't very large. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Rio's group, who were simply amazed by the lands in Rodania, the capital of Marquis Rodan's territory. Despite its lord being banished from the royal capital, it was still a very prosperous and bustling territory. After a brief distraction, Rio and Celia lost sight of Aisha, but soon after, they found her stuffing her belly at a local food stall. Embarrassed, Rio asked how much he owed the vendor, but the merchant informed him that the girl's meal had been covered by the man slumped over the table. That crazy guy was responsible for preparing the ship for the hero, and since he had made a fortune from it, he wanted to play the big shot and share his luck. Rio found it strange, so the merchant explained that the man at the table had mentioned something about the hero being summoned to the city and invited to some kind of introductory party. Celia wanted to know where the hero's ship was headed, and the man revealed that they had departed that day with a princess and her entourage toward Galark. That night at the meeting in Nor, Liselotte told Hiroaki that a dragon was something humans were not yet prepared to deal with, to the point that in the worst-case scenario, they might even need to abandon the city and evacuate the citizens. Regarding the citizens of Nor, the baronet assured that they were in good hands under his care, and the woman thanked him for his efforts. She then asked Huguenot what he thought of all this, but the Duke seemed confused. In response, Hiroaki asked what Liselotte planned to do, and she replied that she intended to return to Amande, where she had left a representative in her place to resume her duties as the city's governor. Hiroki pointed out that flying in an airship would provoke the dragon, but that was precisely why she planned to return by land. If they left the next morning, they would arrive while it was still daylight. The hero found it absurd that only Liselotte and her servants would travel alone, but she assured him that the people under her command were trained in martial arts and would know how to defend themselves. Joining the conversation, Rona asked the young man not to delve into others' personal matters to avoid embarrassing them. He then relented and assured her that he understood the situation, but would like to accompany Liselotte as he was a hero and couldn't ignore what was happening. Huguenot supported Hiroaki's decision due to his status in the kingdom, emphasizing that not even the Duke himself was authorized to give orders to such a prestigious individual. Even so, Liselotte emphasized that Hiroaki was a hero of his country and shouldn't be exposed because of her, but the young man insisted that he was acting as he should, having sworn to protect the Duke and his allies. In other words, the Duke assured that Liselotte wouldn't be his responsibility if something happened. Having said that, he asked what Flora thought, and she agreed, as they couldn't leave Hiroaki alone. Finally, Hiroaki assured that the journey to Amande wouldn't be a problem, but if it were, that would be the moment they needed him most. He then showed that he wasn't joking, mentally conjuring and materializing before them the symbol that demonstrated he was a hero, his divine weapon which he named Yamata no Orochi. The next day, as the group prepared to depart, a warrior was surprised to see Arya and announced that he had been assigned to ensure the traveler's safety. His name was Raymond Brandt, a captain under Duke Huguenot's command. After introducing himself, the knight lamented what had happened to Arya's family, and the woman thanked him for his kindness, though she assured him that she had been very well received by Liselotte. Amidst this, Huguenot announced that the hero had arrived, so it was time to depart. And with that, the group set off toward Amande. After stretching, Hiroaki commented that riding in a carriage wasn't bad once in a while, but Rona warned that the hero shouldn't let his guard down. Liselotte mentioned to Flora that she seemed unaccustomed to riding in a carriage on bumpy roads, so it would be good to let her know if she felt nauseous. But the purple-haired girl explained that she just wasn't much of a talker and found it more relaxing to listen to others converse. Even so, Liselotte apologized if she was being intrusive, but expressed that she genuinely wanted to talk to the girl, as there were many things she wanted to know about her. Showing happiness, Flora expressed her willingness to chat, so Hiroaki intervened and asked not to be left out. Seriously, I don't like this guy. However, Arya ordered the carriage to stop due to the presence of a monster and commanded the fighters to take battle positions. Then, another of Liselotte's servants activated the lever in the vehicle that triggered the defense system, isolating the passengers inside. Looking around, the soldiers couldn't see the monsters, so Arya warned that there was an absurd number of them hidden in the forest. Even though she found it strange that these creatures had appeared so suddenly, she ordered the warriors to raise their shields to protect themselves from a rain of stones hurled by the enemies, while she and the others conjured a magical barrier to avoid being hit. Raymond ordered the wounded to be brought closer to the carriage and asked Duke Huguenot not to leave the interior. Arya asked the captain to position the defense at the front with her, while a soldier informed the officer that there were monsters on the road behind them, and with that, hundreds of enemies began to appear endlessly. Arya then asked Liselotte to stay safe inside the carriage, as she would need to endure some thrown stones. She then told the others nearby that she would eliminate the enemies ahead and that when she initiated the attack, her companions should reduce their barriers and advance individually. After establishing a strategy, Arya launched the magical cannon at the monsters, destroying many of them. She then charged at high speed against the endless hordes, continuing to eliminate numerous opponents. Watching this, her companions understood why she wasn't called the Headhunter Princess for nothing. The second in command then ordered her 4 partners to handle the other side of the conflict, while she, Natalie, and Chloe would deal with this part. Speaking directly to Chloe, she instructed the warrior to stay behind the knights and take down the weaker monsters using one of her more precise attacks, being careful not to hit her allies. Then, the leader joined Natalie to attack after activating their physical enhancement ability. Watching the conflict from the sky, a mysterious man who seemed to be Rice reflected that this skilled servant must be Liselotte's right hand. Additionally, he noted that the defense on both sides was quite strong, and that Liselotte's subordinates were very capable, though they still had weaknesses that needed to be exploited. Meanwhile, Hiroaki and the others inside the carriage were unsure how to react. Anxious, the hero began to show greater concern, so Lizelot tried to calm him down by saying it was okay, as those outside were professional warriors. Hiroaki observed that even with so many professional warriors, they hadn't resolved the situation quickly. Flora asked the boy to trust everyone more, though he showed some reluctance as he didn't know those soldiers. Hearing this, Flora lost her composure and also showed distress. So Lizelot approached, held her hand and confessed that she was also scared, though she was ashamed to admit it. In any case, she asked if it was okay to hold the girl's hand and Flora said yes. Taking advantage of Lizelot's strategy, Hiroaki also held Rona's hand and assured her that he would protect her with his sword, and the girl responded by hugging the hero. However, something extremely heavy fell on the carriage, causing it to shake violently. At that moment, Hiroaki reached his limit and summoned his weapon to fight outside, taking Rona with him. Flora commented that she and Lizelot should follow the hero, but her companion asked her to wait inside while she checked the situation. Upon exiting, she invoked her magical barrier and assessed the immense terror hidden in the forest. After that, Lizelot pulled Flora and joined Hiroaki and Rona. The boy displayed unusual anxiety and emphasized that this world was terrible, as a hero with extraordinary abilities should be the central element of any battle. Amidst this, Lizelot asked Rona to take care of Flora, as she needed to use her magic to treat the wounded. And right after saying this, Lizelot left, leaving Hiroaki worried that this might be one of those stressful plot twists every story has. Without delay, the girl began healing the wounded until Arya arrived, and reported that their forces were being pressed to defend on both fronts and the rear. Arya was handling the front line and was heading to the rear, while the rest of the maids protected the other sides. Thus, Lizelot said she trusted her partner, and Arya returned to the battle. Meanwhile, the hooded man saw that Arya had gone to the rear and thought his distraction had been successful, so he began descending from the sky. Wielding her sword with unmatched efficiency, Arya, the stewardess, decimated the enemy forces, leaving Raymond impressed. She then returned to the officer and announced that she would handle the monsters in that area, asking for his support on the flanks and the front. However, a new element entered the battlefield, promising to turn the tide in favor of the monsters. Rona remembered well that it was a Minotaur, a legendary and ferocious monster from the Divine War of Demons. Immediately, Hiroaki, also known as a coward, fraud, or parrot, who only talks but doesn't act, stumbled there, trembling with fear, thinking this was the end for them, as the gigantic creature approached. To protect her mistress from an attack, Arya accelerated her movements against the monsters ahead, and managed to draw the Minotaur's attention. Although the beast still had the freedom to demonstrate its strength, tossing the carriage away like paper, it reached out to crush Flora. But Lizelot, more of a hero than the hero himself, saved her in time. And at the moment when all seemed lost, well, guess who showed up to save their hides? Yes, our protagonist Rio appeared like a shadow and cut off the Minotaur's hand. When the creature's sword was flung into the air and embedded itself in its own back, Rio descended from there, and Flora immediately remembered when she first needed help, facing a terrible Minotaur, and that the person who helped her was Rio. At that moment, another Minotaur appeared on the battlefield, and Rio raised his enchanted sword and charged at it. Blocking the monster's strike, a whirlwind formed around the human's blade, repelling the opponent with relentless fury, dragging it several meters through the forest trees. Even so, the Minotaur returned to the fight even more enraged, forcing Rio to dodge a deadly blow. However, without difficulty, the human applied a technique that slashed the monster multiple times, defeating it instantly. With that, the soldiers cheered in celebration of Rio's decisive arrival in the war, while the remaining monsters retreated with the death of the main element of their army. After sheathing his sword and turning to the other allies, Rio noticed Flora's presence and automatically recognized her, and he, despite having differently colored hair, was certainly recognized by her as well. Lizelot then expresses her gratitude for being saved in such a difficult moment and introduces herself as the ruler of Amande. Additionally, she introduces the second princess of Beltrum and the current head of the Duke Huguenot's house, in this case, Gustav. Noticing that Flora is acting strangely, Lizelot asks what's going on, while Haruto, who has just introduced himself as well, asks if he has committed any discourtesy. Gathering courage, Flora asks if she and the young man have met before, but he believes they haven't. Surprised by this, since Flora thinks she recognizes the young man, Gustav asks if he is a noble from another land. However, Ryo explains that he is just a wanderer who travels from place to place practicing swordsmanship and not someone who would expect an audience with royalty. Gustav is pleased to find such a talented swordsman, unaffiliated with any nation, hidden in this territory. At this moment, Chloe and the other maids immediately recognize Haruto. Chloe is delighted and comments that she was the one who helped him at the Rika Guild while he was shopping. On that occasion, he visited the main store in Amande and was assisted by her. Liselot is surprised to have such a skilled swordsman as a customer in her store and promises to thank him, a gesture echoed by her maids. Amidst this, Hiroaki Sakata arrives and introduces himself as a hero in a rather arrogant manner. And guys, I hate this fool. Hearing the young man's name, Ryo wonders if he is also Japanese, but without expressing this doubt, he merely comments that Hiroaki is the hero he has heard rumors about and is pleased to meet a hero. Even more convinced of his own importance, Hiroaki responds that Haruto seems to be quite a formidable swordsman. Our protagonist says he is honored by these words and admits he is embarrassed by all the attention. Liselot finds it curious that a man capable of defeating a Minotaur would be embarrassed by her comments, while Hiroaki interrupts the conversation to announce that there is nothing more to be done there, and therefore calls Flora and Roana to return to their remaining carriage and resume the journey. Surprised that the young man can speak the language of Stral, Ryo wonders if this is some kind of special hero ability. Finally, Flora is called again to board the carriage, but distracted by observing the young man she swears she knows, she takes a while to respond. About this, Ryo sees no problem with Roana knowing who he is, but the second princess of Beltram is a different matter, though there isn't much he can do about it all, so he lets it go. However, nonetheless and nevertheless, he met Liselot Kritia, one of the most influential nobles in Galark, and with this in mind, the protagonist offers to restore the carriage lost in the battle, which had been thrown far away by the Minotaur. Liselot suggests to Arya that it might be interesting to check the condition of the vehicle, and Ryo is surprised to discover that the blonde woman is Arya. We then have a flashback where he and his group were traveling to Amande until they spotted the battle happening nearby. Celia recognizes Arya from the air and comments that she is a friend from their academy days. Aisha notices that this woman is wearing a Rika Guild uniform, and Celia adds that she heard Arya serves the daughter of the Duke Kritia's house. Amidst the conversation, Aisha senses the presence of a powerful monster, and the rest is history. Returning to the present and facing the overturned carriage, Ryo cuts part of it and is praised by Liselot. She emphasizes that the man was able to control the wind with this enchanted weapon, presuming it belongs to the class of ancient artifacts. Ryo confirms this but internally adds that in fact he is using spirit arts. Later, the maids gathered before serving drinks for the celebration, and Cosette jokes that Chloe doesn't deserve to know such a handsome young man, asking to be introduced to him. Natalie complains that Cosette is putting the girl in a difficult situation. Then, Cosette comments that the girl still hasn't found a boyfriend because she is so innocent. Natalie takes offense and replies that she sees no advantage in being like her colleague, until Liselot arrives to end the discussion and asks the ladies to return to work. Soon, the drinks are properly served to the heroes and heroines who won the arduous battle against the monsters that dared to cross their path. Arya informs her boss that the carriage is ready, so the ruler heads to the vehicle and thanks Ryo for the brilliant idea that saved this means of transportation. Cosette offers a fruit-flavored water to the country's savior, claiming to have made a specially sweeter mix in hopes of alleviating fatigue. Ryo graciously accepts the cup, while the maid formally introduces herself as a servant of Liselot. The girls around look at the situation as if the girl is flirting with the young man, but for now, they let it slide. With the young woman's departure, Ryo comments that everyone who serves Liselot seems very reserved. Hearing this, the ruler lets out a muffled laugh and thanks him for the kind words. Meanwhile, Gustav just wants to know how to remove the Minotaur's giant sword from the middle of the road. Then, Hiroki asks everyone to step back and approaches the weapon to resolve the situation. Soon, with his usual expression of arrogance, he lifts the blade with his bare hands using pure brute strength, leaving the soldiers astonished. After that, he isolates it and has everyone celebrate. Following this feat, the young man walks through the euphoric crowd and stops in front of Haruto, displaying a presumptuous smile, visibly embarrassing the spectator who had nothing to do with the matter. When it's time to depart, and inside the carriage, Ryo questions if it's really appropriate for him to join the convoy. Gustav responds that he was responsible for saving everyone, so it's an honor to take the young man wherever he wishes. Speaking of which, when they arrive in Amande, Liselot would like to formally thank the savior and bows before Rio. Embarrassed, the young man asks the woman not to lower her head, and Hiroaki agrees, as someone as important as the ruler shouldn't bow so easily to others. Flustered, Liselot apologizes. Having said that, Hiroaki grants permission for Haruto to accompany the journey, since he has demonstrated at least a minimum of good manners, and as always, Rio, being humility personified, feels simply honored by the opportunity. Meanwhile, the scene changes, and we see that Latifa is teaching the Japanese how to speak Australian. After today's lesson, she praises how quickly her students are learning, and Masato shows great enthusiasm for his progress, even calling himself a true prodigy. Aki then deflates her brother's ego, crediting the success to the excellent teacher they have. Masato is then called to go fishing and happily goes to do so. His sister asks about spirit arts training, but the boy just wants to play and is already neglecting his responsibilities. In good spirits, Miharu comments that thanks to the magical artifacts, he can keep up with the beast's children and is having so much fun he can hardly contain himself. In response, Latifa adds that using a magical item will also serve as spirit arts training. But besides Masato, she announces that the two female students should put more effort into their training. Later, they train alongside Orphea, who is guiding them in this activity. In an attempt to summon a water sphere, Miharu does well and controls the element for a reasonable time, but Aki struggles greatly with the task and thinks something is wrong with her, and that maybe, I don't know, the Tatakai. Faced with this, Orphea ends the day's training and calls the students for tea, but Aki decides to take a walk instead. After a brief stroll, she finds two beast children pretending that an empty pot is full of food, which reminds her of a childhood event where she, Haruto, and Miharu played the same way. Back then, the boy promised they would always be together to play, but one day he was taken away, leaving the girl in despair, as he had promised he would never leave. Walking around, Latifa notices that Aki is downcast and calls her to return home. Back at home, the girls prepare a sort of feast at the table, while Sarah comments that Masato is taking a long time to return. Taking advantage of the topic, Aki jokes that her brother was so scared when he arrived, but now he has loosened up. Miharu understands the boy's perspective, as everything was so new for them here. Speaking of which, Aki asks Latifa how she and Haruto adapted to the place, to which she replies that it was difficult at first. Orphea emphasizes that she acted unforgivably back then, while Sarah mentions that a long time ago, Rio was camped near the village barrier that keeps humans away. When they approached to see what was happening, they found Latifa, who had been put to sleep using spirit arts. They thought Rio had kidnapped a child from the village and detained him under that suspicion. However, Rio used spirit arts on Latifa to help her, as she often had nightmares. When they realized their mistake, Alma says they hurried to help Rio, reminding the girl that the young man always said something in his sleep. Clearly remembering, Orphea thinks he said Mizinha, which makes Aki feel downcast upon hearing these words. At that moment, Masato arrives with a huge fish for dinner, but the creature is so big that it leaps from his hands onto the table, causing chaos. After dinner, Minaru practices her spirit arts until the beast children from the village arrive to talk about Aki. Meanwhile, Aki is at the hot springs with Latifa and asks her friend what she and Haruto did before coming to the village. Latifa reveals that she was a slave to a noble in Beltram, but Rio freed her and brought her to the village. Despite the difficulties, the beast girl feels honored to have had the opportunity to meet Rio, and that's why she wants to help him in every way possible. Aki understands how her friend feels because when she was little, she was betrayed by someone she loved, and since then the girl became sad and lonely. But one day her mother remarried, and she gained an older brother and a younger brother, Takahisa and Masato. The older brother was very kind and helped his little sister with all sorts of things, and that's why she also feels she must help him in every way she can. However, Aki is frustrated because she isn't good with spirit arts, and starts to feel bad because of the memories of the past. Sometimes the girl feels like all she does is get annoyed with Masato. And with that, Latifa suspects that Aki feels her heart and mind are already at their limit. But she emphasizes that the girl has had to learn a lot in her new lifestyle, which is very difficult and is making her suffer. She can always rely on her, as they are great friends. The next day, Aki leaves early to practice, and despite showing low performance, she doesn't get discouraged. Upon returning home, Orphea greets her dressed in a school uniform because, according to her, she wanted to wear something special to serve a special breakfast. Soon, Aki sees that Miharu has brought an apple pie and is delighted by her friend's decision as she loves this pie. Honestly, she doesn't understand why the girls would do something so special out of the blue, so they explain that they took advantage of Aki's morning training to follow Minaru's recipe, and then everyone gathers to eat the pie. Aki falls in love with the taste and is sure Masato will be very happy when he wakes up, so everyone has the idea of making another pie for Haruto as well. Since Latifa wanted the boy to see her wearing a uniform, Aki lends hers to the Beast Girl, who dresses in the outfit and feels great in it. The scene then changes, and in the Proxia Empire in the imperial capital of Midgard, Emperor Nidal Proxia is approached by a man named Lucius Yes. Folks, this scoundrel has appeared. He informs that something problematic has happened in the kingdom of Beltrum, and that it would be very bad for them if Duke Arbor were to collapse now. Nidal responds that he sent him as an ambassador as a sign of friendship, as nothing would be resolved with internal conflict. Speaking with the man, Rice appears and informs Lucius that he intends to put his plan into action. But there is a problem ahead, a problem that not even a Minotaur can solve, so Lucius must capture Flora Beltrum. We see then that Rio and the others have finally arrived in the city of Amande. Upon being left in the care of the ruler's maids, our protagonist is informed by Liselot that a messenger will be sent to see him the following morning. With that, the leader bids farewell, and her maid announces that she will take Rio to his lodging. Upon entering the inn, he encounters Celia and Aishia. Worried, Celia approaches, hugs her companion, and asks if he is okay. He reassures her, saying he suffered no harm or anything of the sort. Due to the way the girl approached him, he mentions that everyone around is paying a lot of attention to them, and embarrassed, she pulls her friend to the table. During the meal, he comments that Liselot has arranged a place for them to stay, so they will remain in Amande for the next few days. Celia expresses concern about Arya's involvement, but Rio believes that Celia, disguised as Cecilia, gives off a very different impression, so everything should be fine. What worries him is the fact that the royal family is traveling with nobles associated with the kingdom of Beltrum, especially Flora, Duke Huguenot, and Rowana. Curious, Celia recalls that Flora and Rowana know Rio well, and asks if they didn't notice that he was him. Rio responds that Flora has sharp instincts and noticed something different, but he still believes that the change in his hair color might be hiding him, so he prefers to believe that. Even so, Celia thinks it would be better if they left Amande. However, although he knows there are risks in staying, Rio wants to build a friendly relationship with Liselota, as the hero of the kingdom of Galark might be someone he is looking for, and establishing a connection with someone influential in this country would be great. Regarding this, Celia acknowledges that Liselot is famous for her shrewdness, so she supports the group leader's decision, and makes it clear that she will do whatever she can to help. Taking advantage of the girl's offer of assistance, the young man mentions that he will visit Liselota the next day, and would like his friend to teach him the proper manners for visiting a noble's house. The scene evolves, and Duke Gustav Huguenot comments to Liselot that Arya did an extraordinary job in the battle. Although grateful for the compliment, the girl doesn't understand why the hero of Beltrum didn't resolve the situation. The Duke acknowledges this, though he believes the young man still lacks enough experience for that. Still, she mentions that Hiroaki was strong enough to wield the Minotaur's great sword, presuming that this strength comes from his divine weapon. Gustav considers this likely, and adds that this power can only be used if there is affinity, just as with enchanted swords. They say that affinity with divine weapons depends solely on the heroes. Honestly, Gustav thinks that the fact Hiroaki can use this power without training raises many questions they cannot answer. And to make matters worse, since a hero is someone very important, he fears putting him in unnecessary danger. For this reason, he thinks it would be premature to send Hiroaki into battles just to gain experience, and so he has kept him only in simulated duels with the kingdom's knights. Regarding this, Liselot considers that the young hero's first combat experience ended up being much more traumatic than could have been imagined. But Gustav believes this can be turned into something positive, considering that Hiroaki, despite the adversities, gained experience in this conflict. Hearing this, the ruler of Amande confirms what she already suspected. Duke Huguenot sees the hero of Beltrum only as a symbol of power. In any case, the man reports that if Haruto hadn't appeared, everyone would have been massacred, as he killed 3 Minotaurs without difficulty and saved everyone's skin. Gustav thinks this would be impossible, unless the person had incredible control over the enchanted sword he uses. Something extremely rare to find in a swordsman with such a level of power. In Liselote's opinion, Haruto demonstrates not only skill with the sword, but also in behavior and words, so she believes he might be hiding his identity or be from a fallen noble house. Because of this, Gustav has great interest in getting to know Haruto better to build a relationship with him in the future. With this intention, the noble invites the man to participate in a meeting with the young man the next day. And as a form of gratitude, Gustav offers his knights for Liselot to investigate the cause of the monster's appearance, as having more personnel available to explore the forest could be crucial to the mission's success. She then thanks him for the help, especially since recent reports indicate that more adventurers have been disappearing in the area. Meanwhile, the scene changes, and on the streets, two nobles lead their peers to a very expensive restaurant in the city. From afar, I can already tell that they are Stuart and Alphonse. And well, the blood started to boil, and hatred emanated from my being, as these two are the true scum of the story along with Charles, who tortured Rio in the first season. The girls say that the prices of the dishes at the place they are going to are very high, but the boys flaunt their credentials, questioning if the women know who they are. The women respond that they are indeed nobles. Then the two burst into laughter. Alphonse, the blonde, comments to his friend that he is in a good mood, while Stuart responds that this good moment will erase the events of the afternoon. Alphonse complains that his friend shouldn't talk about that, and grumbles that Haruto simply appeared out of nowhere. Moreover, Hiroaki pointed his finger at them and accused them of hiding from the battle and soiling their pants in fear. And friends, for the first time, I liked Hiroaki a little. Stuart is outraged, as this is not only a lie but also because the hero himself showed fear in the face of war, and yet treats the knights as weak and insignificant. Tired of hearing about this guy, Alphonse just wants another drink. However, upon arriving at the restaurant, the duo causes trouble at the reception, wanting to use the room with a view of the garden, even though other customers are already occupying the space. And as fate is simply relentless, we see that in that same room, Rio, Celia, and Aisha are talking. Then, the inconvenient duo rushes up the stairs, despite the staff's protests, and invades the customer's space, while a waiter steps forward and apologizes for the men's behavior. At this, Rio asks for an explanation of what was going on, and surprised to see who was inside, Stuart introduces himself as a member of the Huguenot family, stating that Alphonse belongs to the Rodan family, and that the two are knights affiliated with the group Rio helped today. Remembering the duo, Rio apologizes for not recognizing them and asks what brought them there. Without beating around the bush, Alphonse makes it clear that he intends to use the room, so the protagonist informs them that he has already finished eating and that the boys can enter. However, when Celia and Aisha were about to leave, the noble stops them and invites them to dinner. And I'm starting to get really annoyed with these guys, and apparently Rio too, as he intervenes and explains that they are already satisfied. The noble acts as if it is inadmissible for someone to refuse his invitation and comments that the boy before him is nothing but a commoner. At that moment, a waiter warns that he will have to intervene if Alphonse and his friend continue to bother the other customers. However, the young man insists on his mistake and states that Rio doesn't know how to treat nobility, and because of this, he threatens to reprimand the commoner for lack of courtesy. Rio, however, clarifies that national and regional laws limit punishments for discourtesy, and this information completely exhausts Alphonse's patience, who tries to attack our protagonist. Rio quickly reacts with a strike that immobilizes the rich boy on the floor. Stuart doesn't let it pass and charges at Rio as soon as his friend gets up to continue the fight, but both are defeated without difficulty, leaving my heart calm and serene, like the waters of a river. Soon news of the fight reaches Liselot's ears, and trying to prove to Haruto that the nobles are not arrogant, she couldn't have imagined a worse situation than this. Because of the incident, she decides to apologize to him the next morning. Gustav then appears to ask her to also convey his apologies to the young man, as after all, as the surname indicates, Stuart is also a Huguenot. The Duke then reprimands the two young men, and reminds them that they should not expect a second chance. And for this reason, he decides to disinherit the duo. Alphonse argues that this is an overreaction considering it was just a fight with a commoner. However, the Duke states that the boy is useful, unlike Alphonse, who is useless and only good for annoying the audience watching this anime. Furious even in the presence of a ducal member, the young man demands that he retract his words. Gustav then explains that Haruto faced 3 Minotaurs, something neither of the two present would be capable of, and that Alphonse and Stuart were defeated even when attacking together. Nevertheless, the Duke decides to give the boys a chance to clear their names, and considering that Liselot will investigate the forest west of Amande, he wants the useless duo to stand out in some way as part of the advanced group of this investigation, as this way the Duke himself could speak well of the duo and ignore this fiasco they caused. However, if they fail, they will have to remain confined in Rodania, and most importantly, this offer will only be valid if the two bullies apologize to Haruto. The next day, speaking of apologies, Ryo feels guilty about the previous day's confusion. Concerned, he asks Celia to stay in the stone house with Aishia from now on. However, the girl makes it clear that she doesn't want to be away from her friend's side. And realizing that her statement might have sounded romantic, she clarifies that she is just worried about her companion. Finally, Aisha comments that if the time comes, they can simply flee, and Celia wholeheartedly agrees. Later, upon arriving at the meeting, Liselot asks Arya to wait at the entrance and proceeds to Ryo and his companions. Politely, the young man asks the two to leave so he can speak personally with the ruler of Amande. The first thing she says is that Duke Huguenot apologized to Haruto for yesterday's fight, and for this reason, she offers a favor if the young man needs it. Taking advantage of the opportunity, the boy requests a written testimony stating that the issue was resolved amicably, and Liselot agrees, saying she will convey the message. Additionally, Liselot then invites Haruto and his companions to lunch at her house, but he believes the two are still tired from yesterday's event, so he decides to go alone. The scene evolves, and later Ryo receives the requested document from Duke Gustav. As a father, the man then calls Alphonse and Stuart into the room so the two can apologize to the guest. Immediately, the two kneel before Haruto and beg for his forgiveness, and with a calmness I probably wouldn't have, he asks the duo to raise their heads. After that, Haruto is taken to the lunch table where Flora and Hiroaki are already present. During the meal, the hero of Beltram misses eating rice with meat, and Liselotte mentions that she asked for this food from the boy's original world to be prepared, but admits it turned out different. However, Hiroaki is willing to try it. At this, a dish with this food is served to him and the others, and upon tasting the first bite, he notices that the flavor is similar to a cheese risotto, so Liselot decides to give this name to the dish. Analyzing the situation, Ryo notes that this rice has the consistency that the Rika Guild developed, and with this, he reflects that Liselotte must have some knowledge about planet Earth. Liselot then asks Haruto what he thought of the food, and he responds that he liked it very much. Curious, Flora wants to know how old he was when he started his journey, and he explains that he was 11 and is now 16. Hiroaki is impressed by the fact that he travels even at such a young age, saying that however this isn't a problem when one is with their parents. Ryo then clarifies that his parents died before he began his adventure, and because of this, he was forced to set out alone in search of someone connected to his father and mother. Gustav mentions that if Haruto wishes to settle somewhere permanently, he recommends that he choose the kingdom of Beltram, and promises to offer favorable conditions to a swordsman of his level. Liselot obviously doesn't miss the chance, and also asks Ryo to consider Amande in his options. Our protagonist was categorical in saying that now he is on a journey, but the future belongs to the future. Hiroaki gets jealous and asks if he is in the presence of the world's savior, and Haruto jokes that he could never compare himself to the true hero of the nation. Ryo then takes advantage of the moment and mentions that another hero has also arrived in the kingdom of Galak. Liselot explains that it is Sumeragi Satsuki, and at that moment, Ryo realizes that this is one of the people Miharu is looking for. To conclude, Duke Gustav invites Haruto to the party since several heroes will be present. Additionally, there are rumors that the heroes summoned to the kingdom will also attend. Faced with this invitation, Ryo feels he is getting closer to the right people, and is happy to have good news to share with Miharu. Meanwhile, during the investigation in the forest, Alphonse grumbles about being under the sun because of a commoner like Haruto, until Lucius appears and threatens the group, and now my mind is bugged, and in a battle between them, I only hope everything explodes and everyone goes to hell. The scene then cuts to Miharu practicing her spiritual arts in the morning, and she feels that Haruto is close to her, but she remembers that he isn't really there, and wonders what he might be doing at that moment. She recalls what Ophelia and the others said about Haruto calling her nickname while he was unconscious, but she is sure that he isn't the Haruto from their world, as that would be like winning the lottery. She then focuses on her spiritual arts and manages to fill a cup with a bit of water. Her friends notice this and praise her for her effort, saying that the fruits of her training are starting to show. Alma wonders why she works so hard, and Miharu mentions that it's partly because it's fun, and also because she doesn't want to be a burden to Haruto, who has been working hard to help them. They think that makes sense, and Sarah states that it's great that she can produce water so quickly. She speculates that this might be due to her telepathic connection with Aisha, but she also acknowledges her own efforts in training. Miharu thinks that she might need to thank Aisha for this and decides to do so the next time she sees her. Meanwhile, we see Aisha staring into space, and Celia offers her some tea. After drinking, Aisha thinks that the taste is the same as Ryo's tea, and Celia reveals that this makes sense since she was the one who taught Ryo how to make tea. The scene then shifts to the forest, where the soldiers ask Lucius if he is an adventurer from a Mande, and Lucius mentions that he isn't. They then ask what he is doing in the forest, and Lucius isn't interested in revealing anything to them, recognizing them as soldiers from Beltrum, which surprises the soldiers. He even notices that they are the elite guard assigned to Princess Flora, and they ask who he really is. Lucius says he has business to settle with them and is pleased to see so many of them there. Rice asks him if he knows any of them, given that he was once a noble in the kingdom of Beltrum, but Lucius says he doesn't. And even if he did, it wouldn't change what needs to be done. Rice then gives Lucius permission to act, and we see Alphonse there in the middle of the crowd. He gets irritated by all of Lucius's talk, which makes him try to face Lucius alone, but the captain stops him, and this catches Lucius's attention. As he is about to start fighting, Rice asks him to be careful not to kill them. Lucius understands, asking him to stay alert in case anyone tries to escape, and draws his sword. Alphonse is eager to face him, but the captain isn't as foolish as he is, so he orders his soldiers to surround Lucius without attacking him, as this is the protocol they follow. Lucius, who clearly doesn't care about protocols, attacks them, knocking several down immediately, saying they should have started strengthening themselves as soon as he drew his sword. Alphonse, as dumb as he is, still doesn't understand that he has no chance against this man and attacks him in the hope of gaining points with Gustav and proving him wrong, but Lucius easily blocks his attack. Alphonse then uses enchantments to enhance his physical abilities, but this also doesn't work, and Lucius manages to throw him back, saying he will leave him for last. He then asks the others to use their strengthening magic, and they do, with the captain giving permission to kill him but capture the other for interrogation. How naive, right? They all attack Lucius at the same time, but he manages to take them down in seconds, and Alphonse begins to realize that things have gone badly for them. He hates the fact that Lucius also possesses an enchanted sword like Haruto, and shows envy, thinking that he too could fight well if he had an enchanted sword like theirs. The captain can't believe they have no chance against this man even though they outnumber him, and Rice starts moving the knocked out soldiers away from the battlefield. He thanks Lucius for making his job so easy, and Lucius decides to finish this. The captain then orders his soldiers to retreat, and as they run, Alphonse, showing pathetic pride, starts doing mental gymnastics, convincing himself that this isn't a retreat, but a strategic withdrawal, and that they will call for help. Lucius is disappointed that the fight wasn't enough to make them understand the difference in their physical abilities, and manages to run ahead of them in an instant. They are surprised to see him, but this doesn't last long, as they are quickly defeated. Lucius then approaches Alphonse, disarming him, and Alphonse once again tries to flee, acting exactly as he is a coward, but he can't escape. Lucius tells him that he will be lost, as promised, and upon seeing his eyes filled with rage, he realizes that Alphonse has lived a dirty and corrupt life. Alphonse then offers Lucius money, begging him not to kill him, but Lucius has no interest in that and knocks him out. The scene changes, and we see Ryo leaving Liselotte's mansion, and she tells him to enjoy his stay in the city, saying she will send a messenger on another occasion. Ryo understands, and Flora hopes to speak with him again soon, as she would like to formally thank him. Ryo states that he would be happy to receive such an invitation and wonders if she has realized his true identity. He thinks he will have to wait and see for himself, and Hiroaki reveals that they will stay in Amande until the safety of the neighboring lands is secured, so he is certain they will meet again. Liselotte mentions that she can also arrange a tea party for them to meet, and Haruto agrees to accept if she invites him. Hiroaki mentions that they should leave this conversation for another time and let Haruto leave, and Gustav agrees, hoping to see him again. Haruto then departs, and later Hiroaki sighs when he is in the company of Rowana and Flora. Rowana asks if something is wrong, and he mentions that it's nothing, pointing out that Flora has been acting stranger than usual. Flora doesn't notice this, and Hiroki tells her that she has been acting differently since that swordsman appeared, as it seems her mind has been elsewhere lately, and Flora denies it. Hiroaki understands if this isn't true, but he points out that this is how it seems to him, and Flora asks him how she seems to him. He explains that she keeps staring at Haruto's face, and Rowana comments that Princess Flora must be trying to think of a way to thank that man for saving them earlier. She reveals that Duke Gustav is also trying to recruit that man, and Hiroaki thinks that makes sense. So Flora pretends that this is what has been happening. Hiroki mentions that he can understand if that's the case, but he thinks they are making a big deal out of Haruto. Rowana states that Haruto is truly amazing by the standards of ordinary people like them, but he might not seem like much to someone as great as the hero. Quite the flattery, huh? And Hiroaki, having his ego stroked, gets all excited upon hearing this and stops thinking about the matter. In another scene change, we see Lucius dragging a thoroughly beaten but still conscious Alphonse. And when they arrive at their destination, Alphonse notices some monsters, but is confused to see that they are wearing the uniforms of Beltram's knights. The captain of the knights is then transformed into a monster right before his eyes, and Alphonse realizes that this is what happened to all the others. Rice explains that these are modified humans and that he is restructuring the bodies and spirits of humans to meet his standards. Alphonse almost vomits upon seeing this, and Rice wonders why Lucius left him conscious. Lucius asks him to test the enhanced revenant process on the subject, but Rice isn't sure if it's worth using one of his precious stones for this, as there is a high chance of failure. Lucius thinks it doesn't matter if it fails, as he already has enough troops to carry out his plans, and Rice agrees with him. Lucius then holds Alphonse, and Rice takes the crystal to insert it into his body. Alphonse almost soils himself in fear, and Rice inserts the crystal directly into his body, then tells him that both his mind and body will undergo intense pain now, and the changes begin to take effect. The scene changes, and now it's night in the Huguenot quarters, where Gustav discovers that the search team hasn't returned yet, and wonders if this means a monster beyond their imagination has appeared. But Raymond mentions that it's also possible that they had an accident, and Gustav asks him to leave, saying he will inform them later how to deal with this. Gustav then thinks that they need someone talented in military affairs, and remembering that Alphonse was part of this unit, he concludes that the guy is as untalented as he expected. In another room, we see Flora wondering if her behavior today was really so unusual, and she wonders what she is trying to do. She thinks there's no way Haruto could be Ryo, as they have different names and hair colors, but a part of her still believes he might be Ryo. She remembers that she still hasn't thanked him for saving her in that past incident, and that she wasn't even able to resolve the misunderstanding surrounding him that happened after all that. She questions whether she should apologize, even though she isn't sure if he would forgive her or not. Next, we see Liselotte apologizing to Gustav for sending her army into the forest along with his, and he doesn't mind as he was the one who suggested it, mentioning that they still haven't confirmed if everyone died or not. Liselotte then changes the subject, saying she wants to send another unit after them and decides to wait until dawn. Gustav agrees, as there is a possibility that the soldiers will return in the morning, and he focuses on the cause of the incident. He thinks they managed to eliminate most of the monsters the other day, and Liselotte recalls that some monsters fled into the forest, but she doesn't think her soldiers would have problems with so few of them. She wonders if this means there are still more minotaurs in the forest, and Gustav states that there might be even more dangerous monsters hiding there, but Liselotte finds it strange, as normally so many monsters wouldn't go unnoticed. Whatever happens, she is sure that dilemmas like this have led them to the current situation and decides to send Arya as soon as the sun rises. She mentions that she will select other capable people to accompany her and even lend them enchanted swords. Gustav wants to offer some knights as well, but he isn't in a position to do so, and Liselotte doesn't want to rely on him anymore, as he has already done enough. Gustav then suggests that they ask Haruto for help, and Liselotte thinks it would be easier to ask him if he were an adventurer from Amande, but she would prefer not to ask a common citizen to intervene in this. He is also busy protecting his companions, and Huguenot mentions that they should ask the city's adventurers for help, but Liselotte opposes this as well, explaining that there is a high possibility that the Minotaurs are still in the forest, and she wants the adventurers to guard the city. Gustav agrees with her. The scene then changes, and now we see Lucius eating and drinking in the forest. At the same time, Rice thinks that his latest specimen should have finished transforming by now. And Lucius asks him to put away his disgusting monsters, as they are affecting his appetite. Rice wants to admire his collection more, but since Lucius insists, he puts them away. He mentions that they will begin the attack at dawn, and Lucius tells him that he should worry about their newest member in this case. We discover that he is talking about Alphonse, who has now transformed into a grotesque creature, which, let's face it, only externalized the rot he already had inside him. The monster thinks he should go alone and take care of everything while they are sleeping. And Rice explains that this revenant is more aggressive than the other enhanced ones, but despite being stronger, he lacks logic and intelligence. So nothing has changed in that regard. Lucius is sure that he will help in tomorrow's attack and gives him some meat to eat. Alphonse devours the meat along with the bone and declares that he will kill everyone tomorrow. The next morning, Aishia wakes Haruto, informing him that monsters have appeared near the city. She can't identify the exact location, but she knows they are coming from the west, and there are probably many of them. She finds it strange that she didn't notice them before they approached and thinks that things have been strange since yesterday. Meanwhile, on the city wall, the soldiers notice some creatures approaching and assume they must be the search team formed the other day. But when the creatures get closer, they discover they are monsters and sound the alarm. Celia runs to warn her friends and hugs Rio, anxious to know what he will do with the danger looming over the city. However, as everything is happening so suddenly, even the hero doesn't know exactly how to act, especially since there might be minotaurs among the enemy ranks ready to cause destruction. Therefore, the first step is to gather as much information as possible to plan the next move. Celia acknowledges that she is being a burden to Rio in this moment of danger, but insists that she can fight with her magic. She says the heroes shouldn't worry about her, and should instead do what is necessary. In response, the young man prepares for war. On the outskirts of the city, loud booms frighten the population, along with the smoke covering the skies as destruction begins at the gate entrance. Rio flies to get a bird's-eye view of the chaos, and notices that the enemies are already inside the city. Amande's response is quick. With their men positioned to face the first wave of adversaries alongside mages lined up on the walls, and reinforcements continuing to arrive to strengthen the resistance. Aisha reports that a large number of creatures is emerging from the east, where the defense isn't prepared to handle a large volume of opponents, especially the gigantic Minotaur leading this charge with its unmatched fury. With a single strike, the eastern gate is reduced to rubble, allowing the invaders access. Concerned, Aisha wants to know what Haruto will do amid the already established chaos. He looks around the area and asks her to keep an eye on Celia. He explains that the residents are being evacuated en masse from the western districts to the northern ones, which means that even if Aisha leaves now, she won't be able to go anywhere. Probably a wave of residents will soon be fleeing from the east, so staying at the inn is the safest option. Since Amande has fewer soldiers defending the eastern gate, Rio decides to help them at this moment. Before the protagonist's arrival, Chloe repels the opponents with her photon bullet, but she knows that without the arrival of new reinforcements, things will quickly become critical. Behind her, the residents gain time to escape, with the warrior's resistance allowing Liselot's maid to catch her breath and keep things as they are, even as the ranks of monsters grow larger and are reinforced by powerful creatures. This would certainly be the end of the Eastern resistance, but Rio arrives in time to annihilate the frontline enemies with his overwhelming magic. Having done this, he takes the front line and asks Chloe and the others to deal with the monsters in the square. Unfazed by the approach of a gigantic beast in front of him, the warrior uses his magic sword to once again blast through the wave of invaders. As he advances to deal with the rest, Amande's soldiers are amazed by our protagonist's power, and in the midst of this, Liselot seeks information to define her strategy. Natalie reports on the Minotaur approaching from the east along with the immense horde, where only Chloe is leading the defense against the large number of enemies. Meanwhile, Cosette and some other maids are probably managing the evacuation in the city center. Faced with this, Liselot orders Natalie to personally gather the maids and head to the eastern gate. Since Duke Huguenot's knights remain in the mansion, they don't need to worry about the leader of Amande, as she will be safe. With her subordinate's departure, the ruler discovers that Rio has just arrived in the east and is containing the threat alone, which brings her great relief. Meanwhile, two important figures from Proxia are infiltrating the city. Lucius is impatient and eager to join the fight, while Duke Aber mentions that they should only act when they receive the signal from the Minotaurs. Reflecting alone, he notices that the aura of that human-shaped spirit has been stationary in the city center all this time, and that soon all the defense forces will likely have moved to the front lines. Back at the Eastern Gate, Rio continues to decimate the monsters without needing help, while a soldier from Amande asks Chloe who this swordsman is, to which she responds that it's Haruto, the skilled man who saved Liselot. Honestly, the soldier thinks Haruto can be described as more than just skilled, but Chloe knows that even he isn't invincible, so Amande needs to be ready when the swordsman tires. On the front line, the monsters no longer dare to approach Rio, as the human assesses that, for some reason, the Minotaur and the Revenants are only in the rear, and if they wanted to advance, they could certainly invade the city quickly, but they continue to insist on staying behind. Trying to understand the strategy behind this, Rio asks Aisha telepathically if anything has changed in the city. So far, she says nothing important has happened, only that people have started avoiding the nearby square, and the evacuation is almost complete. Additionally, it seems that the resistance at the Western Gate is successfully holding off the monsters. At this moment, Natalie and Cosette join the forces at the Eastern Gate and discover that Haruto is handling everything alone, something they suspected but think they should let him rest a bit, as his magic might run out at this rate. Thus, Rio approaches and informs them that his travel companions are still at the inn and haven't been evacuated yet, and he would like to return to help them. To compensate for his departure, the swordsman offers to defeat the Minotaur. Natalie thinks this will be very difficult as the bull is deep in the trenches, but to their astonishment, he says he can handle it in a minute. At this, he raises his enchanted sword again and fires a magic beam that pierces the chest of the gigantic beast, ending it without ceremony. Since he isn't doing anything else, he takes the opportunity to clear more enemies from the battlefield, destroying hundreds of monsters with just one strike. After doing this, he announces that he is leaving and leaves the rest to Liselot's maids. Unable to stay silent, Cosette, with flushed cheeks, almost mentions that it rained around there. Her friends try everything to cut through the bizarre atmosphere that followed after the girl openly flirted with the young man. At the Western Gate, Amande's infantry holds off the monsters with the support of archers. Among them, Liselotta's most powerful maid leads the resistance force and kills several goblins with the weight of her sharp blade. She knows there are many more monsters than when they were attacked in the forest and would love to unleash her most powerful magic to obliterate them all at once, but she needs to be careful to conserve her magical energy or she will run out in the middle of the war. Putting that aside, there is one thing that confuses her. The enemy's most dangerous monsters simply don't advance into the territory. Both the Minotaurs and the Revenants stand still like statues in the rear, posing no threat for now. Because of this, Arya decides it might be risky, but she chooses to advance in the attack. However, at that moment, the monsters that were motionless begin to show an unexpected reaction, letting out roars at an increasing volume, so loud that in every corner of Amande, one could hear the power of those roars. Following this, the infiltrated pieces of Proxia finally receive the signal to spring into action. Lucius then acts as if it were a signal, while Arbar is more methodical and hurries his companion, fearing that the monsters might be killed before expected. But before leaving, the Duke turns to Alphonse, who is hiding, and makes it clear that he is their greatest hope in this battle. Without hesitation, the Special Revenant assures them they can count on him. From this moment on, the most powerful monsters, which were standing behind the lines, advance into the city with all their fury, establishing a new level of challenge for Amande's men. Without wasting time, Arya orders all units to do whatever is necessary to stop this new threat, while she promises to personally deal with the Minotaur approaching with its heavy steps. Unfazed by the presence of this building-sized monster, she leaps to the level of its head, with her sword ready to strike. Meanwhile, after Rio fetches Celia and Aisha, a revenant infiltrated among the population reveals its true identity and attacks a child, causing the swordsman to intervene before it's too late. With a single strike, he sends the monster to its grave, but it wasn't the only infiltrator present. At that moment, several revenants revealed themselves and caused panic among Amande's inhabitants, forcing Haruto to rush once again to contain the threat. After defeating each creature, Rio receives thanks from the child's mother, Clove has just arrived because of the noise she heard but discovers that everything has already been resolved. Mireille, the girl who was almost killed, tells the maid that this man, Haruto, is very strong and was responsible for saving everyone. Once again, Clove is impressed and thanks the swordsman, but he is more concerned with other areas of Amande at the moment. The warrior informs her that some human-shaped monsters managed to enter the city, and she should notify Liselot. Some residents gather around the soldiers to thank them, and then Clove takes the opportunity to ask them to evacuate to the northern walls. Consequently, the people decide to evacuate with Ryo's company, who doubts this is a good idea, as he needs freedom to act on other fronts. But Celia reassures him, saying everything will be fine, calming the swordsman. With time, more residents begin to arrive at the evacuation centers, including at Lady Liselot's mansion, the ruler of Amande. Inside, Hiroaki seems frightened by the presence of monsters in the area, wondering if they attack cities often. Huguenot explains that it's not as common as one might think, but it certainly isn't the first time it has happened. For some reason, Stuart Huguenot, the Duke's son, lets out a brief laugh, causing everyone to look at him in confusion. To avoid any misunderstanding, he pretends that the tension made him thirsty, which caused his reaction. At the northern wall gate, near Liselot Cretia's property, Ryo finishes delivering the citizens for evacuation, and receives more thanks until a soldier approaches the swordsman and says that if Haruto and his companions arrive, they should be immediately received at Liselot's mansion by order of the ruler. In that case, Ryo follows the soldier as instructed. As time passes, now in the late afternoon, Alphonse Rodin, the unique revenant, guides Lucius to the guest room of the residence. As they approach the door, the human warns that the job is up to the monster, always reminding him not to raise a hand against the princess, and that if he doesn't kill the hero, the revenant can do whatever he wants with him. Once again, Alphonse isn't intimidated and assures them that he is stronger than a minotaur, so he will do what needs to be done. About this, Lucius isn't sure if the monster has really retained its intelligence or if it has simply gone mad from the mutation. At that moment, a guard hears voices in the hallway and asks if someone is there. Without showing himself, Lucius responds that he was just taking care of a small matter and would leave soon. But the soldier doesn't believe the story and draws his sword against the possible intruders. Thus, Lucius sighs and decides to show himself, thinking there was no way to escape. The knight asks if he is alone, as he was talking to someone, so Lucius responds that there is no one by his side, at least not a human. After this, a sound of something hitting the door can be heard from inside the room. Hiroaki comments that he heard something, so Duke Huguenot orders his men to investigate. When they open the door, accompanied by other revenants, Alphonse eliminates all the soldiers and enters, letting out a loud laugh. Hiroaki, stunned and completely unprepared, can only stand paralyzed and horrified. And I told you guys that this so-called hero is a total loser. The soldiers in the room prepare to face the invaders, and Alphonse orders the monsters under his command to attack. The captain of the knights confronts one of them before it can harm the people in the room, but the monsters prove to be extremely strong, immobilizing them in the process. While the soldiers are occupied, a monster approaches Hiroaki and the others, and the would-be hero makes a desperate move by throwing a sculpture at the monster, which, obviously, has no effect whatsoever. Hiroaki then remembers that he has a sword and summons it, and Alphonse advances to face him personally. He attacks the hero and knocks him out with a single blow before Hiroaki can do anything. Alphonse states that he has been waiting a long time to slap the life out of him, and Huguenot is shocked and bewildered to hear the monster speak. The monster, showing that he is absolutely resentful of the times when he was still Alphonse, says that Gustav is next on his list, promising that he won't give him a peaceful death. The Duke then follows Hiroaki's example of what not to do and throws a mirror at Alphonse, but he catches the mirror in mid-air and punches him in the stomach. Stuart tries to save his father but can't move, as he is being held by another monster. The captain of the knights and the other soldiers are in the same situation, and Stuart finally manages to break free, but Alphonse knocks him down by throwing the Duke at him. Rowana realizes there's no way out of this situation and acts like a true friend, telling Flora to flee while she acts as bait to buy time. She tells her to run toward the hallway as soon as she finds an opportunity, but Flora disagrees with the plan. Rowana insists that Flora accept the idea, or they'll all end up dead if they stay there. We see that in a desperate attempt, the captain of the knights finally manages to break free from the monster and attacks Alphonse, but the Revenant blocks the strike. Amid the fight, We see that one of the soldiers also manages to cut off one of the revenant's hands, but it has no effect, and all the monsters laugh at the humans' helplessness before them. Rowana and Flora take advantage of this opportunity to head toward the gate, and they hear a voice from outside calling for Princess Flora. Rowana hands the princess over to the person behind the door, asking them to keep her safe, and closes the door. However, folks, the guy outside is none other than that scumbag Lucius, and it made me so angry to see that he managed to take Flora with him. Meanwhile, we see that several citizens have gathered in the square, with more people arriving every minute. And as Rio and his group approach the mansion, Aisha senses the presence of monsters inside. Their conversation is interrupted by Liselotte, who says she's happy to see them safe and thanks Rio for keeping the monsters away at the east gate. Rio responds that this was only possible because of the soldiers and her presence, and Liselotte decides to take them to a safe place. However, before she can continue, Rio asks her if there are monsters inside the mansion, but Liselotte is certain there aren't. She says she also hasn't received any reports from the patrolling soldiers and wonders if he's worried about something. Rio comments that a specific area of the mansion is emitting a strange vibration, and Liselotte informs him that the area he's pointing to is where the princess and the hero were evacuated. She believes that must be a safe place but still decides to send someone to check. Meanwhile, inside the mansion, Lucius continues dragging the princess, and she pleads with him to let her go, as she needs to ask for help for Rowana and the others. Lucius tells her not to worry, as help won't arrive in time even if she warns them, since the monsters inside are strengthened revenants. Hearing this, Flora asks if it was her he was looking for, and Lucius reveals that yes, but he wouldn't want to leave quietly with her, as that's no fun. He wonders how Rowana will feel when she finds out the princess was kidnapped because of her, and enjoys imagining the look of suffering on her face. Flora begins to despair upon hearing this, and Lucius takes delight in her expression. At that moment, Rice arrives, thinking there's nothing he can do about this guy. Rice tells Lucius to hurry up so they can leave, informing him that the human-faced spirit has arrived at the mansion. Lucius understands the message, picks up Flora, and tells her he'll cut off her feet if she even thinks of screaming for help. Rice then reflects that Lucius is more of a beast than a man, as he starts having fun the moment his interest is piqued. At the same time, inside the room, Rowana fires a few photon bullets at the monsters, but it's like trying to attack an elephant with a toothpick. She wonders how strong that monster is, and the monster advances to attack her, but the captain of the knights tries to strike it, causing it to dodge. At that moment, Hiroaki wakes up determined to get revenge for being knocked out, and Alphonse thinks he's more resilient than he imagined. Hiroaki then decides to live up to the title of hero by destroying the monsters in front of him in the blink of an eye, and moves on to face Alphonse next. At that moment, other monsters approach Rowana, and Hiroaki can't help her as Alphonse is already dueling with him. When the monsters are about to attack the girl, Hiroaki performs another heroic act, leaping and decapitating the monsters. He decides to kill Alphonse as well, and attacks him with a sword strike enchanted with water magic. The attack blows a hole in the mansion's wall, and those outside notice, wondering what's happening inside. We see that Alphonse managed to dodge the attack and runs out of the room. Hiroaki tries to go after him but is knocked out from behind by Rice, who tells him he can't awaken his powers at this moment. Rice then tells Alphonse to go outside as there might be interesting prey waiting for him there, and given his recent defeat, Alphonse agrees to follow his instructions. Rice then thinks that Alphonse is far from being the perfect revenant and teleports more ghouls into the mansion using his magic. The ghouls use the hole created by the hero to jump into the garden surrounding the mansion, and the soldiers prepare to fight them while the citizens flee in terror. The soldiers face the revenants, but one of them manages to escape. Fortunately, Rio defeats it with a single strike and continues to destroy other monsters. He then notices that Princess Flora is being kidnapped by someone, and realizing the attention he's getting, Lucius decides to take a break. He announces to everyone that he's taking the princess with him, and the princess pleads for someone to save her. Lucius reminds her that he'll cut her leg off if she keeps talking, and she falls silent. Rio soon realizes that the voice he's hearing belongs to the man who killed his mother, and Celia notices that something is wrong with him. The soldiers go after Lucius to capture him, and Lucius keeps running. Rio wants to chase him, but upon noticing that ghouls are still falling from above, he decides to protect the citizens instead of going after Lucius, leaving him to the soldiers. Sometime later, we notice that the monsters have almost taken over the entire garden, and Liselotte is surrounded by them. A monster leaps from above to attack her. but Aisha destroys it and blinds another monster coming her way. One of Liselot's maids then eliminates the monster, and the others nearby ask Liselot to leave everything to them. Liselot tells them to protect the citizens and asks her soldiers how the pursuit of Princess Flora is going. We notice that the soldiers have already lost sight of Lucius, and Aisha and Celia tell Haruto to go after the princess. Ryo isn't sure about this, but upon seeing his expression, Celia realizes he's suffering greatly and tells him to prioritize his own feelings for now. She mentions that it's her turn to help him and uses her earth prison magic to capture several monsters, assuring Ryo that she can fight too. Ryo accepts the offer and, as he leaves, asks Aisha to handle things there. He also promises Liselot that he'll save the princess and soon sets off after Lucius, and I'm thrilled to see this duel happen. Aisha then asks Celia to raise barriers to protect the citizens while she reduces the number of monsters. Celia does as asked and envelops all the citizens inside the mansion in separate barriers. Liselot is surprised to see this, thinking that not even the court mages could accomplish such a feat, and notices that Aisha is outside the barrier, wondering if she'll be okay. Celia assures her that she'll be fine, as she's as strong as Haruto. Aisha then enhances her physical abilities, taking down monsters as she runs across the battlefield. But the monsters recover almost instantly, and she realizes this isn't working. She borrows Chloe's spear, which she hands over with some hesitation. Aisha then charges across the battlefield, taking down monsters one after another. Liselot realizes that Aisha really is as strong as Haruto and wonders who these people are. Soon, Aisha finds herself surrounded by ghouls, but Celia is sure she'll be fine. At that moment, Alphonse notices Aisha, remembering he saw her with Haruto, and orders his subordinates not to kill her, as he wants to defeat her personally. Keep dreaming, you fool. He then lands on the battlefield, and his underlings attack Aisha, but she takes down most of them with a single strike. Alphonse then tells them to focus on taking down Celia, and the others determined to defeat Aisha alone. They then attack Celia's barriers, trying to force their way in, while Alphonse exchanges blows with Aisha. The ghouls manage to penetrate Celia's barrier, creating a hole large enough to pass through, but Celia uses her earth magic to capture the monsters. She manages to catch all but one, which leaps to attack her, but Aisha throws her spear and eliminates it. She fights Alphonse unarmed, dodging his attacks, and manages to corner him. At that moment, one of the maids throws her spear to Aisha, and she uses it to wound Alphonse. Alphonse can't believe he's been defeated, and Aisha steps back thinking she's won. However, he gets up again, trying to attack her once more, but she cuts off his head, and I celebrated like it was a goal. I was so happy. The scene then shifts, and in another part of the city, we see Ryo flying through the sky looking for Lucius, wondering why he can't find him. He thinks there should be traces of disturbances in the magical energy of the strengthening spell and finally detects a trail of magical power. He follows the trail and finds Lucius escaping into the forest near the city, quickly closing the distance between them with his flight. He swoops down toward Lucius from the sky, but Lucius manages to dodge, not believing someone could catch up to him. He asks Ryo who he is, and the two prepare for the confrontation. We see that Miharu is having some sort of nightmare, where she observes Ryo talking to his mother, questioning why their hair is a different color from other people's, while his mother responds that it's because they came from a place far away from there. Right after that, she ends up witnessing the moment when Lucius orders his mother to be dragged away and even mocks the boy. However, as she looks away, she ends up bumping into Haruto, who is there in his grown-up version, watching everything unfold with a fiery look in his eyes. Driven by rage, he goes straight to Lucius and with a single blow takes his revenge. She rushes to him and tries to embrace him, but he vanishes from there, and after everything that just happened, she wakes up. The scene shifts to Haruto, who had caught up with Flora after she was taken by Lucius, and he was shocked to see Haruto reaching him. Haruto then asks the man to show his face, but Lucius ignores his words and instead draws his weapon, mockingly telling him that if he wants to save this princess, he better stay where he is. But Haruto, trying in every way to show that Flora and an empty bag hold the same value to him, simply replies that he just wants to settle some unfinished business from the past with him, stating that he will send him straight to the afterlife, even calling him by his name. Lucius just laughs somewhat mockingly and reveals his face. At that moment, Lucius realizes that the man before him is the human who made a pact with the spirit, and he understands that if this guy knows his name, it means they've crossed paths before. Lucius then asks if he really has such a strong will to defeat him, mentioning that he seems very calm. Haruto simply warns him that appearances can be deceiving because he has never wanted to put someone in a coffin as badly as he wants to put him in one. Lucius then asks our protagonist's name, but Haruto says that doesn't matter. What matters is his desire to defeat him. Lucius tries to throw our protagonist off guard with words calling him dull and such, but it was all just a distraction because what he really wanted was to catch Haruto off guard and throw a knife at him. And he actually did, but the knife didn't even scratch our protagonist. Using pure magic, he simply stopped it in midair and caught it. The irony of it all is that after Haruto did this, Lucius complained about him pulling off such a dirty trick. Man, just think about it, he acts like that wasn't the same guy who just tried to stab his opponent on the sly. Haruto, just like me, gets a little ticked off at the pot calling the kettle black and simply throws the knife into a tree, while Lucius realizes that his opponent's defense probably has no openings. With that, Lucius decides to add some excitement to the fight and draws his sword, attempting to attack Haruto. Our protagonist skillfully defends himself from all his attacks, including a kick from Lucius, who tried to catch him off guard. Lucius praises him for being able to defend himself, but he mentions that despite Haruto saying he doesn't care about the princess, what he perceives is quite the opposite. He points out that she seems very special to him, or, if he's mistaken, perhaps Haruto just doesn't want to involve others in his revenge. Trying once again to take him by surprise, he lunges forward. The scene shifts, and we see Aisha and Celia fighting against the revenants. One of them even tried to attack Aisha from behind, but Celia managed to warn her in time and, well, heads rolled, if you know what I mean. During the battle, the revenants stop focusing on other people and decide that they have a single target, Aisha. The scene returns to Lucius and Rio, where the antagonist launches multiple attacks on our hero, who once again manages to dodge all of them. Rio then decides to teleport to a blind spot behind his enemy and launches an attack to take him by surprise. However, Lucius notices and tries to use Flora as a shield, but Haruto vanishes in the middle of the attack, confusing Lucius. Then out of nowhere, Haruto appears from above with a direct strike, catching him off guard. However, this time, Lucius is quick enough to evade. Ryo rushes toward Lucius, trying to land a hit, but this time, it's Lucius who lands a kick on him, sending him flying into the distance. At this moment, the fight takes a brief pause to give us some insight. Lucius mentions that Haruto has been precise in attacking at the exact moments when he can avoid harming the princess, noting that this skill is not common. Lucius feels lost, saying that he would never forget someone as strong as Haruto. So he doesn't understand where they have met before. He raises the possibility that their paths may have crossed when he was still a child. With that, he rests his sword on his shoulder and says he's done fighting because fighting like this is no fun. Rio simply replies that his revenge doesn't need to be fun, it just needs to happen. Damn, our protagonist is fired up. Lucius then lets go of Flora and says it's time for our protagonist to reveal his secret because he has made too many enemies in this life, so he can't remember who he is. He also mentions that normally he couldn't care less about such things, but this time is different. Lucius points out that while our protagonist knows everything about him, he, on the other hand, knows nothing about our protagonist, calling it unfair. Haruto simply states that if Lucius doesn't remember him, it's because back then, he wasn't a threat. Seeing that he won't get anything out of Haruto, Lucius places a sword at Flora's neck, threatening to take drastic measures if Haruto doesn't speak up. Rio in turn remarks that it doesn't make sense for this lunatic to have kidnapped the princess just to put her in danger like this. After all, if he kidnapped her, it's because she's valuable alive. Lucius then decides to test the saying, curiosity killed the cat, because honestly the guy is desperate to find out who Rio is. In his frustration, he suddenly declares that he will release Princess Flora in exchange for learning Haruto's identity. After all, he's confident he can capture her again after their fight. Haruto notes that the terms are in his favor and Lucius goes full-on crazy, saying he's doing it out of generosity. At moments like these, I can't help but think, really? Just what I needed. But we move on. Lucius then tells Flora to step away but stay within sight because there are still monsters in the area. She nods and steps away, even trying to speak to our protagonist, but he puts a finger to his lips, signaling for silence, and she obeys, simply moving back. Well, Lucius then mentions that he has already fulfilled his part, and now it's time for Haruto to spill the beans. Our protagonist begins, mentioning that more than 10 years ago, he lived in the capital of the Kingdom of Beltrum, and back then, he took care of a certain mother and her son. Lucius looks surprised and starts to smile, saying that now he understands, pointing out that Rio's features resemble those of the Yagumo people. He adds that the only reason he didn't recognize him sooner was that his hair color is completely different now. He then starts laughing and mocking Ryo, saying that he is only alive because he allowed it. He goes on to say that he always expected to meet him again one day, and that's the only reason he let him survive. He finishes off his vile speech by stating that ruining other people's lives is what brings him the most joy. Ryo then responds that he is glad Lucius is exactly as he is, because that way, there is no room for him to feel any regret later on. Lucius, the king of mockery, merely remarks, "What was I supposed to do? Show you some kind of remorse?" While Ryo makes it clear that he has zero interest in that, Lucius says that's boring because what makes it all the more fun is watching someone come to him with their emotions just so he can trample all over them. Then, he recalls something Zen, Ryo's father, once told him that Ayame, Ryo's mother, was a princess from some country or something like that. Flora shows interest in the topic. Lucius mocks Ryo again, saying that Ayame was a beautiful woman who satisfied him, mentioning that even in her final moments, she kept trying to defend Ryo, calling out his name. And well, at that moment, Flora finally realizes that Ryo is the Ryo from the past, the one who saved her back then. Lucius then notes that Ryo's expression has changed and declares that now they can finally fight to their heart's content, that the big boss is about to demolish him in a one-on-one. Our protagonist simply used insane speed, appeared behind him, and sliced off his arm. Seriously, the time it took me to narrate this was longer than the time it took for this lunatic to become one-armed. But honestly, he deserves worse. He tried to retaliate, but Ryo dodged with ease. After that, Ryo pressed the attack, leaving Lucius with no choice but to defend himself. Lucius, showing incredible courage, tries to flee. But as a bonus, he takes a massive kick to the face. Round of applause for that one. Ryo attempts to stab him with his sword, but Lucius manages to escape, trying to flee yet again. And I just howled at him, running away like a scaredy cat while our protagonist casually summons a colossal magical attack with his sword, putting the very ecosystem of the area at risk. When the camera cuts back to the fight, we see that he probably didn't hit Lucius just because he didn't want to. Lucius questions why our protagonist is launching so many overpowered attacks without even losing his breath and decides to run for his life. But with a single stomp, Ryo causes gigantic rock spikes to rise behind Lucius, who then wonders how the hell this guy is using spiritual arts. But while he's busy philosophizing about trivial matters, our protagonist appears before him and lands another powerful attack. Lucius narrowly teleports away and attempts a surprise aerial strike on Ryo, but Ryo blocks it. Lucius tries to run away again, but Ryo hits him so hard he flies straight into the middle of the battlefield like a sack of garbage. Lucius gets up and once again channels his inner queen of mockery, laughing and saying that the boss is still standing and can take much more. Ryo then simply attacks him again, forcing Lucius to summon a protective barrier in front of himself, but Ryo easily pierces right through it. As the loudmouth lies there, mentioning that his ribs and internal organs are wrecked, he also notes that things will get even worse for him if he doesn't reattach his arm. But at that moment, Ryo grabs his severed arm and incinerates it. So yeah, things definitely got worse for Lucius. Lucius, ever the comedian, says that Ryo is the real villain here. Ryo, in turn, tells him that he's not even close to being on his level, adding that he's going to end this once and for all. Meanwhile, Flora watches silently, and at this moment, I swear I'd bet money that she's about to jump in the middle of the fight to deliver some heart of gold speech, just to fulfill that classic cursed anime trope. Lucius questions if killing him is really the best choice, pointing out that he would be more valuable as a prisoner. Ryo coldly states that he didn't receive any such order. Ryo then moves in to permanently separate Lucius's head from his body, but Lucius manages an unbelievable dodge, though it only earns him a brutal knee to the face. If this were real life, his face would be completely wrecked. Ryo then thrusts his sword into Lucius's chest, and I must admit, I'm surprised Princess Flora hasn't asked him to stop yet. Maybe I was wrong. Ryo tells Lucius that he's holding up well, but that he's about to erase him completely without leaving a single trace. With that, he begins summoning a spell that will literally melt Lucius away, while Flora watches in horror. Lucius then signals with his fingers toward Flora, attempting to make the dagger embedded in the tree attack her, but Ryo anticipates it and saves her. Lucius laughs at this moment, as if he's in any position to do so, and smugly states that he knew Ryo would always have to protect the princess. Ryo then prepares one final attack to put an end to all this, And well, of course, there was going to be some external interference in this fight. Who shows up to save Lucius's sorry ass? None other than Rice. Rio simply tells the guy that he has unfinished business with Lucius. But Rice replies that unfortunately, he also has matters to settle with him. Rio points out that he got here first. Rice tells him to calm his heart and asks if he's really trying to kill Lucius, warning that if he does, he won't be able to conclude his own business. Rio then points his sword at Lucius and asks if he's really going to run away like a coward with his tail between his legs. Lucius, furious, demands that Rice let him go immediately. Rio may have lost his chance for revenge, but he gained something even more valuable at that moment, the villain's name. Now, he knows that the man standing before him is Rice. As the two argue about how their battle would play out, Rice, without making a fuss, quietly summons a dragon above him, which unleashes a massive attack on the forest. Haruto only survives thanks to Aishia's warning, which came just a fraction of a second before impact. After the attack, Aishia mentions that it's all over now so they can dissipate the magic they were using. The scene shifts back to Haruto, who watches as the dragon flies off into the distance, which, in other words, means that their escape was successful, while he and Flora remain standing in what was once a forest. Flora then calls his name, asking if he is the Rio from the past, mentioning that she has spent all these years wanting to apologize and thank him for saving her. Rio gently pushes her away and says that he can't imagine why he would need thanks or an apology. Flora asks if this whole topic bothers him, and he replies that it's not exactly that. He simply tells her that if she truly wants to thank him or anything of the sort, she should do so without calling him Rio. He then tells her he will take her home, while internally reminding himself that he cannot reveal that he is Rio. The scene shifts, and we see Liselot thanking Aishia and Celia, mentioning that it's thanks to them that they suffered far less damage than expected. Celia, noticing that there are many injured people around, mentions that she has knowledge of healing magic and wants to help. With that, they head toward Duke Huguenot, who is being treated by Rowana. Celia then takes Rowana's place while Rowana explains that they were attacked by monsters in that room and that they only survived thanks to Hiroaki's efforts. Though he is currently unconscious, he's not in any real danger. Rowana then asks about Flora, and Liselotte explains that a man kidnapped her. Rowana immediately starts panicking, realizing that she handed Flora over to him completely unaware of what she was doing. However, Liselotte reassures her, explaining that Haruto went after her. Right after their conversation, Aishia looks out the window and calmly states that Haruto has returned with the princess in his arms. They all rush downstairs to meet him. Liselotte expresses her deep gratitude for rescuing the princess, asking what she can do to repay him. But Haruto simply asks if she can take care of Flora from here. Liselotte nods, agreeing, but asks if he would at least come to the mansion with them. Rio declines, saying that it's fine. Rio then tries to set Princess Flora down, but she clings to him and dramatically claims that her legs feel weak. Rio sighs and says it's fine, he'll carry her the rest of the way. As they walk through the ruined mansion's corridors, Liselotte asks if he noticed anything peculiar about the kidnapper. Haruto replies that he knows the man's name Lucius, and that he crossed paths with him in the past. Celia simply processes this information, wondering what it could mean. The scene cuts to Lucius, who now looks like a mummy, while Rice comments that he comes from an era when medicine actually burned when applied, so he understands that real healing is supposed to hurt. But he assures Lucius that this is the only way to save him. After all, his opponent turned him into minced meat. So in this case, the phrase "no pain, no gain" takes on a whole new meaning. Lucius mutters that he only lost because he didn't have an arm, but Rice tells him to drop that nonsense. He points out that with Lucius's current level of strength, his chances of winning are simply zero. He admits that they underestimated Haruto, and states that all they can do now is acknowledge their defeat and cut all ties with him, as they stand no chance against him in their current condition. The scene shifts from the cowards to the emotional ones, and we see Rowana greeting Flora with relief because, let's be real, she practically handed her over on a silver platter. Haruto gently sets the princess down on a chair and says that they are leaving now. But Liselotte stops them and insists that they should stay and recover a little. The three of them accept her offer. Additionally, Liselotte wants to schedule a discussion later so that everyone can exchange information, and she asks if Haruto could share everything that happened. Our protagonist doesn't oppose the idea. However, as they're about to leave, Celia notices the expression on Flora's face but doesn't say anything. The scene progresses, and Celia serves some tea to help calm everyone's nerves. She notices that Ryo seems mentally elsewhere and asks him what's on his mind. Our protagonist finally opens up and admits that Princess Flora realized who he really is. Celia quickly connects the dots, understanding why Flora was looking at Ryo that way. Celia then asks what he did about it, and Ryo replies that he asked her to forget the name Ryo, but he's not sure if that's actually going to work. Celia, on the other hand, believes that Flora will keep the secret and that everything will be fine. Ryo then mentions that they can't stay there for too long, otherwise people might figure out who Celia really is. So he thinks that after their conversation with Liselot, they should head to the spirit village. Celia agrees. Ryo also mentions that since they already know that Satsuki has been summoned, he would like to inform the people in the village. Ryo asks Aisha if that's okay with her and she says yes, but she asks if he's really fine with leaving like this. He reassures her that he is. Celia, just like me, is completely lost about what these lunatics are talking about. Ryo notices and asks her what's wrong. She then directly asks Ryo what exactly happened between him and Lucius in the past. She mentions that it's okay if he doesn't want to talk about it, but she admits that she's curious. Ryo simply tells her that he is going to avenge his mother, explaining that Lucius is the man who killed her right in front of him. He also mentions that Lucius might even be the one who killed his father as well. Celia lowers her head and apologizes, saying she feels bad for making him bring up such a painful subject. Ryo reassures her that it's okay, adding that he would have told her anyway if she asked, because he never wants to lie to her or hide anything. However, he warns that it's not a pleasant story. He states that he hates that man and that he will never be able to forgive him. However, he has decided to face everything head on, and because of that, despite everything, he feels at peace, at least about this matter. Ryo then asks Celia to keep this conversation between them, as very few people know about it. She immediately agrees, promising that she will always be by his side, and that he can always count on her. The scene progresses, and now the group is gathered for their much-anticipated discussion. Duke Huguenot mentions that they have some details about Lucius, explaining that he comes from a low-ranking noble house in their kingdom. He adds that Lucius once fought against Alfred to try to become the king's sword, but was not chosen because, right before the nomination, his house fell from nobility. Hiroaki speculates that Lucius only kidnapped Flora out of resentment toward the kingdom, but Liselotte warns against jumping to conclusions, pointing out that they still don't know how the other man Rice fits into this whole story. Huguenot then says he recognizes that name, mentioning that Duke Harbour's house had secret ties with a diplomat from the Proxia Empire. However, he also notes that the name could just be a coincidence. Liselot considers this, mentioning that according to Princess Flora's account, Rice hid his face under a hood at the time. She then asks Haruto if he saw anything. Haruto replies that he didn't, but even if he had, he wouldn't be able to say whether Rice and Duke Harbour are the same person, as he had never known anyone by the name Rice before. They then conclude that the best course of action is to track down Lucius. Liselot then asks Haruto what he plans to do next. Our protagonist says that something unexpected has come up, so he plans to leave Amanda for a while. Liselot tells him that it's fine, adding that his absence will give them time to properly prepare a reward for him. Haruto, however, says that they're already going through tough times and should focus on more important matters. Liselot disagrees, saying that wouldn't be right, because if they are alive and safe, it's thanks to him. Even Duke Huguenot, after declaring that he is eternally grateful, admits that he has been racking his brain trying to find some way to express his gratitude properly. Haruto finally gives in and says that he does have a request for Liselot. He wants to attend the ceremony in Galard, where the heroes will be introduced. He specifically states that he is interested in Satsuki Sumeragi. The scene then shifts to the spirit village, where everyone is enjoying breakfast. Latifa suddenly mentions that she felt Haruto's presence. Miharu, startled by this, probably because of her nightmare, ends up dropping her plates of amorich. Luckily, Sarah catches them before they hit the ground. They all rush to meet Ryo. Amidst the greetings, Ryo tells the three people from his world that he has news for them. He has learned that Satsuki Sumeragi was summoned to the kingdom of Galard as a hero. Aki immediately asks about her brother. Haruto apologizes, saying that he still hasn't found any leads on him. However, he urges her not to lose hope, reasoning that if Satsuki is here, it's very likely that her brother will be found at some point as well. Though personally, I fear he might have been summoned by the enemy kingdom. Ryo explains that in 1 month there will be a ceremony introducing the heroes, and he will meet Satsuki there. He also tells them that if they want, they can travel to Galar together. Since everyone is excited, they decide to throw a celebration. Miharu, however, is simply grateful that Haruto has returned safe and unchanged, recalling the horrible nightmare she had about him. They finally sit down to eat. As Miharu watches Haruto, she reflects on how similar he is to the Haruto from her world, not just in appearance but also in preferences. And then the scene changes. We finally arrive at the hero introduction ceremony, where Satsuki is officially introduced as the hero of the kingdom of Galard. We see Ryo watching her closely. Next, we see Hiroaki, who is accompanied by Flora and Rowana, representing the Kingdom of Restoration. Then, we are introduced to Takahisa Aki and Masato's brother, who is revealed to be the hero of the Kingdom of Centostella. Another hero, Shigekura Rui, is also introduced as the hero of the Kingdom of Beltram. And then a Knight of Honor from the Kingdom of Galak is announced, Haruto Amakawa. And my friends, the moment Miharu heard that name, she finally realized that he is the Haruto from her world. And well, how will Miharu and the others from Earth react to all these shocking revelations? Well, unfortunately, that's a conversation for next season because just like the first season, the second ended on a brutal cliffhanger. And all I can say is, I'm beyond hyped. I want the third season right now because I absolutely love this season, just like I love this anime's story. Honestly, this season was a blast to follow, but what made it even better was you. So thank you for watching, subscribing, liking, hyping, and commenting. Know that you made this journey even more special. And if you're not subscribed yet, don't waste any time, hit that button now.